The media swarmed around him, demanding, did he really take down an A-rank gate and subdue an S-rank hunter? Is he hiding his true awakening level? He had once believed that becoming a hunter was all luck and bluffing. In reality, he felt worthless. If his true F-rank level were exposed, the powerful S-rank hunters he supposedly defeated would likely seek revenge. One top-ranked hunter who had entered a gate with him definitely wouldn't let it go. He wondered if he might even be cursed. As the reporters fired questions at him, he lowered his head. Letting them misunderstand him felt as burdensome as being trapped in the life of a hunter. With a dark expression, he finally snapped, "No comment, you annoying brats." Their initial shock quickly turned into an onslaught of more questions. He added, "I won't be stuck on this rotten planet for long. Everything went downhill the moment I decided to resign." In truth, he wasn't even a resident of this planet. On Alfieri, he held a vital role as the strongest wizard. But one day he thought, I've got to quit this damn job. It was treated like a form of public service. He could work himself to death and still earn nothing. He was expected to toil 640 days a year without a single holiday. With advances in technology, sleep and food were no longer needed, and endless overtime had become just another part of life. When was the last time he'd left work on time? The real challenge lay in how to actually quit. With his status, resigning wasn't easy. They'd set up strict barriers to keep high-ranking individuals from abandoning their duties. For example, if he tried to use teleportation magic, a jolt of electricity would hit his brain. And even if he somehow managed to escape, there was nowhere to hide. The rulers had control over every corner of the planet. What if he killed his superior? Impossible. He was bound by powerful magic, unable to harm anyone from this planet, including himself, which made even suicide a challenge. As he wrestled with how to break free, a sudden thought hit him. While they could restrain the body with magic, the soul was a different matter. No spell could cage a soul, which meant it could escape without limits. After 10 years of relentless trial and error, he finally mastered his unique magic, soul manipulation. By separating his soul from his body, he could escape to a distant planet where no one could follow. And he succeeded. With this feat, he became the first in history to achieve true possession and reincarnation. He slowly woke up and noticed something resembling a long, protein-like mass moving. Then he realized it seemed as if the soul had left that body not too long ago. He admired himself, examining his face in the mirror. He tried to retrieve the memories of his host, but couldn't recover any. Suddenly, he clutched his abdomen in pain, covered his mouth, and slowly began losing consciousness. Then he realized that this body had starved to death. He had set a condition before activating reincarnation, targeting the creature with the highest magic power on the planet. If the condition was met, naturally, the species with the highest intelligence would follow. But he hadn't considered the state of the body. He thought it wouldn't matter even if the body was a single-cell organism. He felt as if acid had been poured into his stomach. He slowly got up from the bed, realizing the magic wasn't working correctly after reincarnation, and that he needed time to adapt to the planet's magic. He began walking forward, planning to put something in his stomach first. When he approached the door and opened it, he was surprised by the sunlight, as his home had been mostly covered in liquid where starlight rarely reached, making it a dark and bluish place. But this place was completely different. He felt bright and warm, surrounded by a light and dry atmosphere, with solid ground beneath his feet. Yet he realized his priority was to find something to eat. But no matter how much he searched, there was nothing to eat. Then he started screaming in frustration, realizing it was no wonder the previous owner of that body had starved to death. Everything was turning gray for him, and he clutched his stomach in pain, knowing that at that rate, he was going to starve to death again. Then his eyes fell on an insect. It was too small, but he knew this wasn't the time to be picky. So he picked up the insect, opened his mouth, and said, "Thanks for the meal." Then he noticed a boy walking by, holding something in his hands and putting it in his mouth. He threw the insect away, realizing it was food and looked like it would taste much better. Saliva dripped from his mouth as he looked forward, thinking, "Should I steal it or not?" The poster stated, "If you see a suspicious person, call 112. Report immediately." Our alien was silently following the kid when the kid stopped and looked back, and was petrified to notice a suspicious-looking man following him. Then the boy started running, and the man tried to stop him, feeling confused. Then he noticed a plant nearby. He was about to eat a plant, thinking it was better than stealing someone else's food. Suddenly, he stopped when he heard a loud sound. He wondered if it was the kid's scream and decided to check what was happening. The boy was shaking in horror, and in front of him stood a large monster. The creature charged at the boy, opening its mouth to bite, but only managed to grab the boy's bag, causing the kid to fall to the ground. The monster landed behind him, missing its target again as the boy scrambled up, running and screaming. As the boy ran toward him, he looked at the creature in confusion, thinking it was truly a wretched planet if he could encounter something like this just by walking down the street. Then he realized that maybe this was actually good, because this body definitely had memories of eating birds. He thought that finally, here was a wild animal worthy of being prey. As the strongest Grand Sorcerer, he could kill that monster with just a cough. He smiled, adding that once he adapted to the magic here, conquering this small planet would be no trouble at all. The monster now stood before him, and he sensed its magical power. It was incredibly strong. He was surprised, realizing he could feel it sweeping through every cell of his body. He was certain this was Earth's magic, but then he collapsed to the ground because it was too overwhelming. He explained that if other planets were like small buckets, here it felt like diving into a swimming pool. Kim Ji-ryok was very excited. Thinking about how such a golden land could exist, it was a jackpot. With dazzling eyes, he thought that with magic this abundant, there was nothing he couldn't do. Meanwhile, a kid called him Mister and asked for help. But Kim Ji-ryok stood silently, annoyed and wondering what if this alien wasn't a grand sorcerer like him. He finally agreed to help the kid but added a condition. Give me what's in your hand. The kid was confused by the strange request. Then, a monster behind the child tried to free itself, and the kid ran to Kim Ji-ryok, crying, I'll give it to you, please just spare me. The child darted behind him. Glancing down at the kid, he firmly said, Stay back for now. As the head of the 1st Mage Division, tasked with defending an entire planet, he was confident that he could dismantle the creature with a mere gesture, reducing its bones to ash. Yet nothing happened. Scratching his head in bewilderment, he began to wonder if his unease stemmed from the unfamiliarity of this new environment. He summoned his magic once more, but still, there was no response. After repeated attempts, the unsettling truth dawned on him. His magic simply wasn't functioning here. Then our boy Kim Ji-ryok began running from the monster, calling for help. Suddenly, he found himself in front of a car, and the driver barely managed to stop in time to avoid a collision. The driver started screaming at him in anger, oblivious to the monstrous threat looming above them. The monster relentlessly chased him, prompting him to make the split-second decision to veer off in a different direction. Without warning, the monster lashed out, striking the car with its claws, then resumed the pursuit, forcing him to sprint away from the terrifying monsters. Even as he emerged onto the main road, the monster continued to pursue him relentlessly. He hadn't eaten anything and felt weak, but he knew he had to keep moving to escape the monster's grasp. He decided to change directions again. The monster prepared itself, leaping into the air and flying above him. As it charged down from the sky, he felt a surge of panic, certain he was about to be devoured. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his abdomen, and he wondered if his body had a weakness. Just as the monster was about to strike, he fell to the ground, causing the monster to crash directly into a nearby wall. As it was thrown aside, a bright energy began to emanate from his body. Covering his ears, he opened his eyes to find the monster lying dead next to him. He stepped forward, astonished. Could it be that the monster had crashed into the wall on its own? Was it really just a stupid bird? He pondered the absurdity of a bird flying at a dangerous angle, crashing into a wall, and meeting its demise. He felt an urge to ask the scholars of Earth how such a foolish monster could exist. His stomach grumbled as he hungrily eyed the creature. Convinced it must be an edible bird, he approached it, but suddenly, a voice called out to him. When he turned around, he was startled to see a girl staring at him in surprise. She recalled how, as a child, she had shouted to her friends, announcing that some uncle got caught instead of me. While running, the kid had insisted, "We can't be late." She asked the guard if this was the last confirmed location. He replied with a firm yes. Without hesitation, she ordered her team to stay put. The beginner killer, a bird monster from the sandy desert gate, was originally classified as an E-rank monster that could be subdued by regular firearms on Earth. However, its rank suddenly soared to C rank, thanks to its missile-like charging speed. She ran, her mind racing with a thought that hunters below C rank would be taken out before they even had a chance to see the monster. They needed to act quickly to prevent any casualties. However, when she arrived, she was shocked to find him standing before the defeated monsters. She wondered if he had accomplished that feat all by himself. Just then, the guard arrived with a child, who excitedly informed him that he had found a police officer. Then the guard thanked him for his hard work, explaining that they had received a report about a monster sighting and rushed over. Fortunately, it turned out that a hunter was nearby. He felt a wave of confusion wash over him at the mention of hunter, as he struggled to recall anything from his memories. As the guard thanked him for capturing the monster, she couldn't help but wonder how he had managed to catch it so quickly. Did this person really just happen to run into the monster by chance? The beginner killer's habitat was a sandy gate where one's feet sank with every step, making it easier for the monster to ambush anyone outside. On solid ground, it could be killed hands-free if the angle was guided correctly, but that required the visual acuity to track its swift movements. When she looked closely, she realized he had killed it using a proper method. If that was the case, she wondered, this person should probably be at least C rank. He told them to wait and called out to the kid. With a pocket-sized face, the boy stretched out his hand and reminded him not to forget their promise. After a moment of reluctance, he handed over the bottle. When Kim Ji-ryok started drinking from it, he was amazed by its taste. He exclaimed that it had been ages since he evolved into a body that didn't need food, Yet here he was, faced with this incredibly delightful egg. Shocked, Cian Wuyun wondered if he had just taken what the kid was eating. The child cried out, "My fresh tangerine." Suddenly, Cian Wuyun called to him, extending her hand to introduce herself. She was from the Hunter Association, and her name was Cian Wuyun. They shook hands, and she added that he had handled the monster without a scratch. Wiping her hands, she admitted she didn't recognize him around here. She then asked if he was a freelance hunter, and if he could provide her with his hunter ID, explaining that she needed it to report this to the association. Standing before her, he felt confused and thought that he should just make something up for now. He replied, "Sorry, I don't have my hunter ID with me at the moment." She responded that she would simply look him up in the association's hunter registry. She asked him what his name was, but he didn't even know this body's name yet. Confused, she looked at him and asked if he had at least registered as a hunter, and what about the awakening test? She shouted at him, "Don't tell me you used your awakened abilities on the main road without even registering." Then she informed him, "That's illegal, you know?" He wasn't entirely sure what they were talking about. But could he really be in this predicament? He replied that no, of course he was registered, but he had left his hunter ID at home. If she waited there, he would bring it right away. He left, convinced he would never come down this road again. Upon arriving home, he discovered his ID, revealing his name, Kim Kiryo. But there was no sign of the hunter ID anywhere. It seemed this body truly hadn't gone through hunter registration. He looked at all this stuff, confusion washing over him. Why was there so much of it? As he examined the pile, a realization struck him. They were cigarettes. The owner of this body had been a heavy smoker. Anger surged through him as he realized just how much this guy had indulged in smoking. For wizards, smoking was particularly dangerous. It combined internal magic with the external magic of nature to cast spells, relying heavily on the respiratory system, especially the lungs. He shouted in anger, realizing, so that's why he couldn't cast magic. He wondered what on earth had possessed this body to ruin his lungs. In Alfieri, where the majority of the population could use magic, such a choice would be unimaginable. He had thought they were just primitive, but he never expected there would be people this insane. He took a moment to calm down, releasing a long sigh. He asked himself, what's done is done, so what can he do about it now? It was his fault for being so blinded by the sheer amount of magic that he hadn't noticed the flawed body. He thought there had to be a way to fix this. After all, he had escaped from that place. He couldn't give up over something like this. He was determined to live the rest of his life in this new land. And he would definitely live happily. The officer asked him, "Someone as knowledgeable as you, why did you do that?" He offered an apology in response. About 10 minutes had passed since the personal investigation. A woman and her child were looking at him with confusion, and he felt extremely hungry. He thought, there's still a mountain of things to investigate about Earth. But first, he needed to find a way to solve this state of malnutrition. Then he caught the sweet aroma of food drifting from a pork soup shop nearby. As the shop owner served him the steaming bowl, he realized, so there was food this close by. He had gone through unnecessary trouble without even knowing it. As he dug in, he was surprised the soup was delicious. It was hot but bursting with flavor, even as his mouth tingled from the heat. But he couldn't stop. His hand seemed to move on its own. He thought he might actually be falling for this food, it was just that good. Sometime later, he found himself at the police station, where an officer asked him, "Is the country in trouble or something? For a young man like you to be dining and dashing?" He replied that he had honestly forgotten to pay. Just then, another officer recognized him and asked, "Aren't you that hunter from earlier?" He told Kim Jiriok not to do it again, saying he'd let him off with a warning since it was his first offense. Kim Jiriok, flustered, replied that he would definitely pay the restaurant. Then, with a hopeful look, he asked if he could leave now. He took a card from his pocket and said, "Before you go, this is from the investigation earlier. It seems you're not a registered hunter with the association. You must have awakened recently," he then added. "Try visiting the Awakening Examination Center. And don't worry, the examination fee is free." As Kim Jiriok was leaving, curious, Kim Jiriok couldn't help but wonder. What was this awakening thing everyone was talking about? Was it a concept that people on Earth were supposed to know? They were insisting so much, should he give it a try? Sometime later, he found himself standing in front of the Awakening Examination Center. Then it hit him Kim Jiriok had been here before, and his rank was F rank. He suddenly remembered Kim Jiriok was an F rank awakened. Someone called out to him, saying they had met again. It was Cian Wuyun. She smiled and asked, "What brings you to the association?" She added, "Since you're here, could I get my hunter's license now?" He recalled that he had lied earlier about bringing the hunter's license. Fortunately, he had recovered some memories, so he could say for sure now. He replied that he was sorry about earlier. He admitted that he had said that out of panic, but the truth was that he didn't have a hunter's license. She expressed her curiosity about why he hadn't come back. He responded, however, that he was registered as awakened. He simply hadn't applied for the card because he was disappointed with the test results. She was confused, so he explained that his rank was F. Surprised, she asked him, "Your F rank? Then how did you catch the beginner killer?" He said it was pure luck and explained that a stupid bird had rammed its head into a wall on its own. She stood there, contemplating the idea of a beginner killer failing to adapt to its environment and accidentally killing itself. There were actual cases of this happening, and it wasn't impossible. But the person she saw then wore an expression as relaxed as if they had killed hundreds of C-rank beasts, with not a hint of fear. She couldn't help but wonder why he was trying to hide his rank. Most of those who hide their awakening level are dangerous individuals involved in illegal activities. Could this person also be one of them? She nervously replied that she understood. He remarked that they were lucky. Beginner killers were known for their low intelligence. He thought to himself that Earthlings used subtle facial muscle movements to express emotions. He realized he should learn expressions like that to appear more friendly. Determined, he decided to give it a try. He said, "That's right," and added with a creepy smile that he was really lucky. When she saw his smile, she felt a wave of horror wash over her, thinking, he's definitely suspicious. She searched through her jacket, her mind racing as she thought about how she needed to get out of there safely for now. Turning to him, she said that she had forgotten to give him something. She asked him for his name. He replied, "It's Kim Kiryu." Then she handed him some money. He was overjoyed, wondering how offering money as a greeting could be a custom anywhere in the universe. He asked her why she was giving him this. She replied that he had left the beginner killer's corpse behind earlier. She explained that she had to dispose of it, and that's his share of the money. He was drooling as he thought about the food he had eaten before getting caught that morning. With just this fluttering piece of paper, he realized he could get 6 bowls of soup. Kim Jiryok told her he couldn't believe that bird was worth so much money. Then he asked, "Are the feathers expensive?" She replied that no, beginner killers had soft bodies, making them not valuable as products. He noted that he was lucky it had a magic stone, as C-rank magic stones sold for 2 million won. He asked, "Wait a minute, 2 million won? But his share is only 50,000 won." She explained that the damage costs incurred when he caught the monster were processed under her name. Then she scolded him, saying that if only certain individuals hadn't fled, they could have legally obtained hunter immunity. He apologized to her. She turned to leave, saying, "It's all right. Have a good afternoon then." But her anger bubbled to the surface as she exclaimed, 2 million won, you say? He thought that in his homeland, that bird head was no different from a bug crawling on the street. He felt a surge of excitement as he realized that 2 million won was just for twisting off a bird's neck. That was enough for 75 bowls of soup and rice. To survive, one needed money, and he had come to this earth for a happy life. To enjoy an ideal lifestyle, he realized he needed even more money. So he had to become a hunter. Honestly, until lunchtime today, his future had seemed bleak. The owner of this body had been dirt poor. Spending money on a bowl of soup would have wiped out all their savings. But now it was different. Now he knew that being a hunter could actually bring in money. In that case, he would hunt with magic and make a living. Standing in the middle of the street, he thought that although magic wasn't working for him right now, he would need a sufficient number of monsters. Then he noticed a gate, but with people around, it would be hard to enter. He wondered if there were any other gates nearby. Sensing the mana around him, he realized there was indeed another gate nearby. Sometime later, he was walking through the forest, wiping the sweat from his brow because that slope had nearly killed him. As he crossed a sealed area and approached the gate, he muttered to himself that Earthlings really did have a strange sense of aesthetics. He couldn't help but ask, why on earth are they decorating plants? Sometime later, a party gathered before the same gate, and a boy was speaking on the phone with his manager, informing him that they had just arrived at the gate. His name was Yoon-son, and the caller asked if there were any civilians around. He replied that it was fine. The control line was set up well. The caller told him that anyway, these mutations were killing him. He had lost count of how many times the rank had changed this month alone. Yoon-son reassured him not to worry. They would start the investigation right away. He ended the call and turned to his party, saying, "Let's go." As they walked inside the gate, a foul odor hit them. The cave stank from the midsummer heat. He informed them that according to measurements, the internal magical density was at a D-rank dungeon level. Our boy chimed in, saying it was always like this. It had almost become a rule. Yoon-son began examining the cave and then nervously suggested that perhaps they should slow down a bit. They seemed to be going too fast. Our boy looked at him and asked, "Why, brother?" He told them that they had walked quite a bit and there were no signs of monsters, so it was probably fine. Our boy noted that he was young but couldn't understand why he was always so timid. Just then, Yoon-son noticed something behind him. Meanwhile, a large monster loomed behind the boy, ready to strike. Meanwhile, Kim Jiryok walked ahead, pondering whether he had mistakenly entered the depths of the cave. Why hadn't he encountered any monsters yet? As he continued, he noticed the mana in the air. Though small and crude in appearance, the mana radiated an undeniable vitality. He followed the trail, wondering if it belonged to a human. Upon reaching the source of the mana, he realized that someone else had already entered the gate. He peeked through the rocks and spotted a rock golem confronting a dungeon party. The monster stood ominously before them, having just killed the previous boy. leaving everyone horrified by the scene. Yoon-son shouted to them, urging them not to panic and to regain their senses. But before he could finish his words, a powerful attack hurtled toward him. He managed to notice it in time and attempted to block the blow, succeeding but still being thrown back. Gathering his strength, he recharged his power and leaped toward the monster, landing a powerful strike on it. On the other side, Kim Ji-ryok observed the battle. Yoon-sung stood over the defeated monster, his head bowed in remorse for the loss of his comrade. Then another boy remarked, as expected of Yoon-sung, "He may belong to a defensive class, but an A rank is still an A rank." He told them he would recover Kyeomin's body and suggested that they gradually head back. Suddenly, the golem awoke again, but this time his reaction was delayed. The monster seized him and slammed him down onto the ground, causing him to cough up blood from the brutal attack. As his teammates shouted his name in worry, the monster prepared to strike them next. Noticing the imminent danger, the boy quickly drew his sword and charged at the creature, but his weapon shattered upon impact. He was violently thrown aside and crashed to the ground, unconscious from the force of the blow. The girl, paralyzed with fear, glanced back at the advancing monster, which was preparing to punch her. She let out a terrified scream, but just then Yoon-son appeared, shielding her with his own body. He held the monster at bay and shouted, "Now's the time. Use the binding magic quickly." He told her that he couldn't hold back the monster, and that they wouldn't make it out alive. He barely managed to stop himself, and added that their entire team would be wiped out. He shouted, "Hurry up." When he glanced back, he saw her running away. As she fled, his thoughts were with his comrades, silently urging her to stay. The monster shattered his shield and slammed him to the ground, leaving him gasping for air and coughing up blood. Lying injured, he slowly closed his eyes and realized that what he felt after being betrayed was not anger, but a deep emptiness. He obtained an A-rank awakening as a result of the dungeon break phenomenon. Offers from all sorts of massive guilds began pouring in, each one more enticing than the last. He made valuable connections, formed a team, and increased their gate conquest achievements. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, but who would have thought he would end up like this, in such a miserable way? As he threw a stone at the monster, it turned its gaze towards him. Kim Ji-ryok exclaimed that he really couldn't stand it any longer. He wondered, is this the nature of Earthlings? Well, thanks to that, he was done with his analysis. It was clear when you saw it up close. But it was completely outdated, wasn't it? Well, he guessed it didn't matter. Anyway, he said, "It's nice to meet you in a place like this, Golem." Golems are clay figures powered by mana. In Alpha Yuri, they handle tasks ranging from labor and errands to warfare, forming the backbone of a nation built on golem labor. Although he majored in golem weaponry, he explained that the absence of monsters in the area is due to a golem on guard duty. This gate appears to be private property. With the guard now awake, escaping would not be easy, and he would have to confront it. Lacking magic, he resorted to other methods. As the golem lunged to catch him, he deftly dodged its fist by jumping aside. When the golem struck again, he evaded its blow, but as it raised its fist, the golem's punch landed on the ground with a powerful impact. Our boy Kim Ji-ryok was exhausted but remained confident, even in the face of difficulty. He could dodge the golem's attacks, taking advantage of its size and clumsiness, but his body felt too weak. Suddenly, the golem launched an attack, and Kim ducked as its massive body shook, creating waves that rippled in front of him. The golem swung its arm and then stepped back, preparing for another strike as it punched the ground to create distance. In a twist of fate, Kim fell to the ground just as the golem's fist became stuck, filling him with a surge of joy. He explained that stopping the golem was simple. The large gem embedded in the golem's arm was not just an ordinary decorative jewel. It served as a magical energy detection sensor. All he needed to do was input the emergency stop command into this sensor. For security reasons, only the golem's owner and creator knew the stop command, but a model as crude as this one could be deciphered at a glance. Finally, our alien Kim Ji-ryok began to use his magic, causing the golem to collapse to the ground. He leaped onto it, noting that since he had only activated the emergency stop command, the golem didn't fully shut down. To switch it to offline mode, he would need to remove the core located at the center of its back. Kim Ji-ryok climbed onto the golem's body, muttering about how he wasn't thrilled to do this barehanded and without any tools, but he had no other option. With determination, he removed the plate shielding the core, seized it, and severed it from the golem, which instantly deactivated. For our alien Kim Ji-ryok, this seemingly daunting task had turned out to be surprisingly simple. Meanwhile, Yoon-sung lay unconscious on the ground. Slowly, his hand twitched, stirring as memories of his mother's words came back to him. She had told him that she understood his dream of becoming a hunter, but questioned if he was aware of the dangers involved. He had reassured her, reminding her that despite appearances, he was an A-rank awakened. She acknowledged his abilities, though she added that her concerns weren't without reason. While she respected his wishes, a part of her couldn't help but worry about what might happen if things went wrong. Taking her hand, he assured her not to worry, promising he'd prove his success as a hunter and asking her to trust him just this once. As he prepared to leave, he told her he'd be on his way, but she stopped him with a gentle reminder to stay safe. He rose slowly, his body trembling, then froze in confusion as he looked up and saw our alien companion standing triumphantly on top of the defeated golem. He wondered aloud if Kim Ji-ryok had managed to capture it barehanded. But more pressing was the question. How did he even get in here? Yoon-sung was certain a security line had been set up. As he began to consider the possibility that Kim Ji-ryok might be a hunter, he saw Kim leap down and walk toward him. Yoon-sung, exhausted and barely able to move, suddenly realized Kim was standing right in front of him. Despite his fear, he watched as Kim simply extended a hand to help. A while later, on the rooftop of a building, a man was skimming an article about Yoon-sung, grumbling over the sensational headlines. He scoffed, wondering if this was truly the kind of story Yoon-sung had agreed to. Yoon-sung simply responded that the article wasn't about what the man was suggesting. Irritated, the man pressed further, questioning why the story had to be framed around the future. He knew that another hunter, not Yoon-sung, had taken down the monster, and it annoyed him that Yoon-sung didn't even know the hunter's name. After all, if they were truly stronger, surely they'd be famous by now. He further mentioned that no one seemed to know the description of the individual, suggesting the person might be an unregistered hunter. He pointed out to Yoon-sung that it was fortunate the reporters were focused on the A-rank monster. Otherwise, the situation could become troublesome. Frustrated, Yoon-sung angrily called for the director, who calmly explained that his warning was for Yoon-sung's own good, cautioning that this could only damage his career. Even if the hunter was an A-rank, any sign of weakness would instantly make him a target for others. Yoon-sung knew this all too well, yet he still didn't claim the credit for catching the golem. Instead, he listened quietly, then apologized, explaining that he felt compelled to be honest. It was, in his eyes, the least he could offer as a gesture of respect toward that hunter, who seemed like someone who wouldn't resort to illegal activities. The director questioned Yoon-sung, asking if he was absolutely sure. Yoon-sung replied that if the hunter held any grudge, he wouldn't have let him leave alive. He explained that the hunter was a good person, and that he genuinely wanted to repay him. Seeing how serious Yoon-sung was, the director understood. Yoon-sung then excused himself and left. As he watched him go, the director couldn't help but wonder about this hunter, who had effortlessly taken down a golem that Yoon-sung's team had struggled with. If such a powerful and honorable hunter existed, he hoped to meet him one day. On the other side, our alien Kim Ji-ryok was lying on the bed, watching his phone and thinking that Earthlings were gods. The previous night, he had accidentally unlocked his smartphone, and it had stayed that way all night. He could access information freely, even though he wasn't part of the privileged class. He wondered if this was heaven. He added that, thanks to that experience, he had gained a wealth of information. First, the gate he had entered was not private property. Second, each gate had its own unique entry restrictions. Since Korea was a country that managed awakeners rigorously, even accessing a gate required prior approval. This approving body was known as the Korea Hunter Association, abbreviated as Hunhyup. Finally, Yoon-sung was not just a petty thief attempting to rob a gate with an owner. He was much more than that. He was stunned when he realized that Yoon-sung was an A-rank hunter, prompting him to decide to obtain his hunter's license first. Sometime later, in a forest, a girl explained to a group of people about the theoretical safety training conducted inside the gate. She then announced that the devices would be distributed shortly and asked everyone to wait for a moment. Our alien, Kim Ji-ryok, appeared rather dull. In summary, he grasped the concept. Don't act recklessly in front of monsters. An officer handed him a device, and Kim looked at it in confusion. Surprised to discover that Kim didn't know what it was, the officer mockingly asked, "Where have you been living all this time? In the mountains? Did you come from another planet or something?" Kim sharply observed his surroundings, realizing he might have revealed himself as an outsider. The officer continued, "This is a basic analyzer. It utilizes pixiglass technology." A girl nearby released a flurry of butterflies and instructed them to reflect the monster in the lens. Kim aimed the analyzer, which identified it as a poison butterfly of grade F, he realized, so Earthlings use tools to determine the enemy's identity. The officer further explained that all analyzers support not only monster identification, but also item search functions, assisting users in finding useful resources. He encouraged them to look around and give it a try. Kim decided to analyze the officer, but the analyzer couldn't retrieve any data, leading him to suspect it didn't work on people. He then used it on a plant, which was identified as a heat fruit, a species characterized by red fibers. Kim thought to himself, is this the item identification function? Then it should be able to recognize this too. He tried it on his shadow, but the analyzer didn't find any data, noting that it only categorizes useful resources. He realized that it detected only items infused with mana, distinguishing between valuable and worthless objects based on their mana presence. While he found this capability convenient, he also deemed it rather imprecise, as there were useful things that lacked mana. His soil was a prime example. At first glance, it appeared to be ordinary soil, but it possessed absorption magic, a rare spell that absorbs mana. He noticed that no one around him seemed to know about absorption magic, which he found quite strange. If this world had even slightly advanced magical studies, there's no way they wouldn't recognize absorption magic, he thought, puzzled by their ignorance. After excusing himself, he approached an officer and posed a question. The officer agreed to answer, and Kim asked when magic, or more specifically awakeners, first appeared in Korea. The officer explained that it happened 7 years ago, triggered by dungeon shocks that caused awakeners to emerge simultaneously around the world wide. Kim was surprised as he thought to himself, it's only been 7 years? The history of magic in Alfury has surpassed 60,000 years. He realized that he had been living among primitive people all this time, which explained the strange electrical properties of their tools. Reflecting on this, he mused, primitive magical knowledge. Yet an enormous level of technological prowess, it's fascinating how evolution has taken such an unusual path. Finally, he scooped up some soil in his hands, contemplating, he can use this, and no one will ever suspect a thing. In a profession where one can earn hundreds of millions with determination, being a hunter seems enticing. However, contrary to the glamorous portrayal in the media, the lives of lower-tier hunters are often a living nightmare. To make matters worse, one of the legs of his vessel was damaged, leaving him unable to use magic at all. With his funds dwindling and starvation looming once again, he needed to find a new way to earn money before it was too late. For now, he had gathered a significant amount of mana using absorption magic. From his discoveries, it appeared that there were monsters on Earth that could be defeated with this ability. However, these creatures resided in C-rank gates, while he was classified as F-rank, which prohibited him from entering. Additionally, he felt a sense of unease about using absorption magic to gather mana without a thorough understanding of Earth. And the fact that the body he inhabited was also F-rank only compounded his difficulties. Suddenly, his phone started ringing, startling him. It was an emergency disaster alert about a dungeon break. Feeling confused, he quickly put on his coat and rushed out of the house, eager to witness the chaos for himself. Everyone was running from the area due to the dungeon break. He walked forward toward the crowd and noticed a huge tower with an A-rank monster atop it. Suddenly, someone pushed him aside, causing him to stumble. The man who had shoved him scoffed, "I barely nudged you." "They're the ones causing a scene by blocking the way." With a sneer, he added, "What's with that expression? Are you looking to get hit?" He was left bewildered, as he had simply been observing the chaos unfolding around him. The man remarked, "He's got quite the attitude," informing him that he was a hunter, while he was just a regular person lurking around. He replied that he was also a hunter, and there for the same reason. The man inquired about his rank, and he responded, F-rank. The man's laughter left him feeling confused by the unexpected reaction. Then he noticed helicopters arriving, engaging in a fierce battle against the monster. Suddenly, one of the helicopters was struck, plummeting to the ground in a fiery crash. Shortly after, support hunters rushed to the scene. The monster attempted to break through the glass as people scrambled to escape in a panic. It succeeded, lashing out with its tongue and snatching 2 civilians, dragging them out of the building amid their horrified screams. Just then, a swift strike severed the monster's tongue, freeing the terrified civilians. Realizing the monster was trying to escape under the tower, Yoon Sung alerted everyone. A woman took aim with her bow, releasing an arrow that struck the monster's tail, severing it and preventing its escape. Yoon Sung leaped down, delivering a powerful blow to the beast. As the monster collapsed, he followed up with a decisive punch, killing it instantly. They had caught it. Yoon Sung approached him, and the excitement around them grew as everyone eagerly sought his autograph. He learned something from his recent research. In this world, A-rank hunters are elite members of the top 3% of awakeners. They form a powerful force that significantly contributes to urban safety and serves as idols to the public. The crowd around him buzzed with enthusiasm, squeezing him tightly and making him feel uncomfortable. Suddenly, Yoon Sung called out to him, grabbing his hand and excitedly thanking him, recalling the incident at the gate when he had come to his aid. The man felt a rush of realization. No wonder Yoon Sung looked so familiar. Yoon Sung asked him, "But are you with this group?" He had noticed the man glancing over earlier, and with a blank expression directed at him. The man thought Yoon Sung was angry. In reality, Yoon Sung was simply observing him. The man felt a wave of relief when Yoon Sung shifted the conversation. Taking advantage of the situation, he formally introduced himself, saying, "My name is Yoon Sung." If it wasn't too much trouble, he asked our boy for his name. Our boy replied, "Kim Kiryo." Sensing an opportunity to delve deeper, Yoon Sung posed a question to Kim Kiryo, eager to engage further. Yoon Sung truly wanted to repay Kiryo Hyung, though he knew Kiryo might not feel the same way. Yet, was there really no other option? The unease had been gnawing at him ever since Kiryo vanished, especially since the man had saved his life. Kim Jiryok couldn't help but recall how, back then, he was simply running, desperate to escape, terrified of being caught by the police. There was nothing unusual about an A-class hunter wanting to repay a favor. With a glimmer of excitement, Yoon-son was told there was indeed something he could help with. Kiryo-hyung showed him a location on his phone, asking if he would join him at the gate for a bit. Before long, they found themselves in a forest-like dungeon. Yoon-son, however, had worn a troubled expression since they'd arrived, prompting Kim Jiryok to ask him what was wrong. Yoon-son simply replied, "No, it's nothing." But Jiryok urged, "Let's pick up the pace a bit." Still, Yoon-son couldn't shake his thoughts, struggling to believe that a remarkable hunter like Kiryo-hyung would need his help at all. Moments earlier, Yoon-son had said with enthusiasm, "It's an honor to enter the gate with someone like you. Are you here to gather materials by any chance?" But our boy Kiryo-hyung surprised him by replying that he was actually there to hunt monsters. Caught off guard, Yoon-son admitted he hoped to learn a thing or two, though he also wanted to clarify something. It seemed like he might be misunderstanding Kiryo's intentions, especially as he himself was only an F-class hunter. So our boy Kiryo-hyung hoped he could rely on Yoon-son as his porter. But Yoon-son was stunned when he saw our boy Kiryo's card. He thought, there's no way you could really be an F-class. Rumor had it that some mid-level and higher awakened were manipulating their rankings to avoid the association's control, since they were often forced to respond to dungeon breaks. Could that be why Kiryo-hyung was hiding his true level? Soon, they arrived at a place where molten lava pooled, surrounded by monsters. Just as he'd seen online, a flame spitter lurked in their path. Our boy Kiryo-hyung looked confused, so Yoon-son explained there was a translation error with the analyzer in Korea for a while. That monster was originally discovered in Ohio. Since it's a bat that flies around engulfed in flames, it was registered as Firebat in Pixie. But due to the translation error, it ended up with a strange name like Flame Spitter. Just then, they noticed the bats emerging from the misty film and surrounding them. Our boy Kiryo reached into his pocket for something, and Yoon-son, observing his actions and curious since earlier, asked, "What's inside that bag?" The monsters charged forward to attack, but Kiryo quickly threw a handful of soil towards them, igniting them in flames. Then our boy explained calmly, "It's something I keep for situations like this. Its performance is guaranteed." Yoon-son, surprised and a bit hesitant to ask during the hunt, finally spoke up, "Why do you insist on using items? You could take down C-class monsters with your bare hands." Our boy thought to himself, did this guy read my hunter license with his foot? Or does he not know much about the world of low-level awakened, since he sits at the top of the hunter pyramid? Deciding there was no need to reveal any weaknesses, he turned to Yoon-son and asked, "Have you ever thought about awakening like this? Imagine lifting a 1-ton truck, or filling an empty plot of land with water. A convenient ability, right? But we didn't earn this through effort. It just happened suddenly one day." He paused, adding thoughtfully that since it had appeared without reason, it could just as easily disappear without reason. He found this power uncomfortable, so he didn't rely on his awakening abilities. With a nervous expression, he thought it was just nonsense, but he would believe it. He cried out, saying he was absolutely right. Things that are easily obtained tend to disappear just as easily. He exclaimed in his mind that it made sense. He added, moreover, looking at the current trends in gates, mutations are becoming increasingly unpredictable. So this could prepare them for a future where they wouldn't be able to use their skills in a dungeon. Yoon-son excitedly told Kiryo-hyung that he had this foresight all along. But Kim Jiryok was hiding his face in embarrassment. Then he realized it was because people with high awakening levels could roughly sense things with their instincts. It was like getting goosebumps around S-class hunters. He had thought he was just imagining it since he didn't feel anything, except maybe like a fly. Hearing this, he was shocked. He thought, what did he just say to Alfori's best magician? A fly? He was amazed. If he trained to control his abilities, could he hide his mana too? He had never seen such precise control in his life. Knowing this now didn't make him happy at all, and he thought, so awakening levels are indeed the same as mana quantity. Let's just go with that for now. He replied, well, roughly, yeah. He then asked if, should he ever want to do something like today again, he could call him, but he was told that his debt had already been paid off. He explained there was so much he could learn from being by his side. Actually, his team had disbanded due to an accident a while ago, and it had been less than 6 months since he awakened. Operating alone was dangerous because of his lack of experience, but forming a team again was not an easy task, and he knew that as well, being betrayed by a comrade. But deep down, he feels the same way. If he offered to help, he wouldn't refuse, but he'd warn, don't think I'll come to your rescue if things get dangerous. Our boy said he had to always protect himself, because he didn't have the ability to protect him if they fought together. He would lose, he admitted, because he was that weak. As for the golem incident, his response was just a bit. The problem, he pointed out, was that the other person was too hasty. The other guy listened admiringly, misunderstanding his words and thinking he was modest. Then, he wanted to know our boy's age and told him he was 22 years old. At that moment, our boy realized he didn't know how old Kim Kiryo was. So he exchanged phone numbers with him to show his ID card, which was on the back of his phone. It turned out that our boy was 24 years old. which left Yoon-seon surprised at the mere 2-year difference between them. Our clever guy had gotten the information he wanted. He had no memories of college, and his phone contacts were completely empty. Our boy couldn't help but wonder, what on earth is Kim Kiryo? What kind of life has he lived? Meanwhile, someone sat on his couch, listening to the news about the increasing gate mutations nationwide. The Hunter Association remained unable to determine the cause, even among high-ranking assessors, which only fueled growing concerns among citizens. The person listening to the news was a muscular man with a blue head. Yesterday, he received a message from Yoon-sung asking if our boy wanted to check out something cool the next day. Yoon-sung had priority entry to a new gate. Without hesitation, our boy replied, sure. How could he resist when someone was offering to show him something cool? In Korea, when a new gate emerges, access is restricted, and an investigation team is sent in. Once the association completes its investigation, the gate is open to the public. And today was opening day. There was a rumor that an unfamiliar plant had been discovered inside this new gate, and maybe that unknown plant held the key to restoring his magic. He just needed to check out the plant at the entrance and leave. There were quite a lot of people gathered. Our boy asked, are all these people going inside? Yoon-sung replied, most of them are probably just spectators and journalists. But there seemed to be more people than he had expected. A red-colored supercar sped down the road, catching our boy's attention. The car came to a stop in front of them, and one of the doors opened. A man with blue hair stepped out. It was Kong Chong. Our boy couldn't help but ask, who is that? Yoon-seon explained. That's Hunter Kong Chong, the S-rank hunter. S-rank? One of the 3 in Korea? Our boy thought, noticing that Kong Chang's mana was stable. He's definitely a rare talent. Suddenly, Kong Chong turned sharply toward our boy, Kim Jiryok. His eyes were unusual, and Yoon-seon whispered, they're dragon eyes. Apparently, it's a really rare item. Confused, Yoon-seon watched as Kong Chong approached them. He directly asked our boy, what's your name? He replied, pardon? Kong Chong repeated, your name? And finally our boy said, Kim Kiryo. He further questioned his hunter rank. Suddenly, Yoon-seon tried to defuse the situation by telling Kong Chong that this person was just a porter helping him out. He asked, is there a problem by any chance? Kong Chong, however, angrily responded that he wasn't talking to Yoon-seon. With that, he fell silent, and our boy simply stated, F-rank. Kong Chong didn't believe it. Is that true? Our alien wondered. Did he sense the latent mana within Kim Kiryo's body? Mana, after all, was merely a power output organ. Just because the respiratory system was refined didn't mean the total mana within the body decreased. A sorcerer of Kong Chong caliber could probably gauge someone's potential with even the faintest signal. If he doesn't believe him, our boy can show his hunter ID. But Kong Chong told him that only an F-rank hunter would dare to look an S-rank hunter straight in the eyes and answer. Before the conversation could go any further, Yoon-seon intervened, pushing him away. They had only come for a quick look, and now they needed to leave. If they didn't go now, they'd be late for their appointment. Our boy glanced at Kong Chong, who stood silently watching them. Yoon-seon then asked, you really don't know who Hunter Kong Chong is? Have you been abroad recently? Nervously, our boy replied, I've been away for a while. He didn't want to sound like he was gossiping because that hunter didn't have the best reputation. Our boy was confused, so Yoon-seon explained that he had a record of assault. No one wanted to enter a gate with an S-rank criminal, and even if they overlooked his past, the recent stories weren't great either. He inquired what happened, and Yoon-seon mentioned that he had a cousin named Choi Jin, who was ranked 3rd in A rank. She entered the same gate as Kong Chong and got attacked by him. He heard that Kong Chong only picked fights with strong awakeners. Our boy realized that Yoon-seon had rushed him away, worried that the crazy S-rank would mess with him. What a thoughtful little mammal. They headed back for the day, deciding to check out the so-called mysterious plant later. Our boy asked Yoon-seon about Kong Chang's eyes, which he had earlier described as a kind of dragon's eyes item. So, did that mean it was tradable like the shield Kong Chong used? Yoon-seon explained that yes, when he first acquired it, it was in the form of a small orb. He probably swallowed it when he used it. Did he happen to have dragon's lungs? Yoon-seon started checking, and found that there were only transaction records, with nothing currently available. But since lungs weren't very popular, they might show up eventually. Our boy asked why they weren't popular and about the price. Yoon-seon explained that unlike eyes or hearts, lungs didn't boost mana. The liver could at least be made into medicine, but lungs supposedly had no real effect. And the price was 2.6 billion won. Our boy was shocked beyond imagination, while Yoon-seon thought that was cheap. He couldn't even buy other parts no matter how much he paid. Our poor alien should have just not listened. A taxi was speeding down the road, and our boy was checking his phone. The more he learned about Kong Chong, the scarier he seemed. It was crazy that someone like him was still out there walking around freely. Should he have avoided eye contact back then? What if he ended up messing with him too? Then a red car came out of nowhere and struck the taxi. Our boy was surprised as the taxi slammed into a nearby building and stopped. The driver, worried about his passenger, checked his condition and found he was okay. Then the driver got out, furious, shouting at the other driver. He stepped out and apologized, clearly regretful. It was Kong Chong, who explained that it had been a while since he drove, so he had mixed up the accelerator and brake. Our boy was confused to see Kong Chong here. Kong Chong didn't want to settle things like this, so he asked our boy if he could give him his contact information. Our boy wondered just how bad someone had to be at driving to crash on such a quiet road. Meanwhile, the car driver, barely able to speak his name, Kong Chong, handed him some money, and the taxi driver thanked him. Kim Jiryok was wondering how much that could possibly be. Kong Chong asked if he could take down his contact information. He had just spent all his cash, so it seemed they would need to settle his medical expenses slowly. He wasn't sure what Kong Chong meant, but he guessed this was how traffic accidents were usually handled. It was just a phone number, so why not give it to him? And so, our innocent alien handed over his phone. Kong Chong, originally the only son of a prominent company's owner, had been born with a silver spoon. He became a hunter, but eventually developed a record of aggravated assault. With so much money, it was expected that he'd hire a good lawyer and get away with it, but instead, he was sentenced to prison. There were countless testimonies online stating that Kong Chong had been abusive to others. However, there was a larger issue at hand. His parents had died a few years ago during a dungeon break. Immediately after the incident, Kong Chong sold all the shares he inherited from his family's companies. He effectively liquidated his family's businesses. People used the unclear timing of his awakening as an excuse. Rumors started circulating that Kong Chong committed assault because of money, but it still hadn't been proven true. Kong Chong asked if he was on his way to take care of that girl again today. He found it a bit surprising that someone like him was working as a porter, knowing of jobs that paid much better than that. He then asked if he was interested in hearing about them. Kong Chong was smiling ear to ear. Our boy was cursing Yun Sung, thinking, he really misses you right now. Sometime later, Yun Sung was shocked by a car accident involving Kong Chong. He said he had plans with our boy and ran off immediately. But now that he thought about it, it felt like that bastard had caused the accident on purpose. Yun Sung realized it was true that Kong Chong was picking on strong hunters. He guessed that our boy had avoided trouble thanks to Kiryu. Even an A-rank like him could become a target. With a hunter like Kiryu around, our boy wouldn't stand out. If Kong Chong could do that, he must be powerful. Our boy was thinking, what should he do? Should he call the police? But what would he even say? He imagined telling them. An S-rank hunter said he would protect me safely and give me items. Then he decided he should just forget about it. He asked, did you watch TV this morning? He told them that Korea ranked second last year in gate management excellence evaluations. Although abnormal mutations were still a serious issue, civilian damage had been significantly reduced. Our alien thought, this mammal has an excellent ability to choose topics every time. The concept of the gate was intriguing to him as well, as it mirrored a microcosm of his own experiences. On a certain day in 2017, a mysterious phenomenon appeared simultaneously all over the world. The gates, monsters, and the awakened. The principle of magic uses mana drawn from the planet's core. However, unlike Alfieri, Earth's rocky terrain would have made it a difficult place for mana to rise. But the gate phenomenon that appeared 7 years ago acted as a well for drawing up mana, and through that, some who were exposed to the mana became awakened. However, there is still little understanding of the normal gates. He didn't quite understand. While Yun Son was calling him, he asked, are you not feeling well? He had just gotten lost in thought for a moment, so he quickly apologized. Yun Son asked, what were you thinking about? He had been imagining what it would be like if he were the one who created the gates. He thought this situation would be unsatisfactory. Yun Son asked, why is that? So he explained, regardless of the intention, the monsters in the gates try to kill us. The items found inside are just cheese laid out on a trap. But if the little rats figured out how to eat only the cheese, wouldn't they get angry? Yun Son said, now that you mention it, that could be true. Our boy noticed the energy bubbling up like lava beneath his feet, while Yun Son asked, what's wrong? Suddenly, the mana started pulling him inside. Yun Son was horrified as a huge magical tornado surrounded him, and he was pulled in. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a white corridor. Our boy wondered, is this really inside the gate? There was no worse situation than encountering monsters in a dead end like this. He moved forward, with a body incapable of even using a single fire spell. How was he supposed to get through this? Then he stopped before a huge gate. There was a stone tablet. It looked like something was written on it. Then he saw two men walking toward him from both sides. One was Kong Chong, and the other was Zhang Heizong. Our boy wondered, who is that person? They both walked forward. Kong Chong had heard that Zhang Heizong was in Singapore, but he replied, he just returned today. Our boy thought they didn't seem that close, so he asked if they knew each other. Kim Kiryu had to ask, don't they know Zhang Heizong? Our boy thought, it's only been 2 weeks since he came to Earth. How would he know? Kong Chong mocked, did you see? It looks like you really don't know him. You should probably work harder on your activities. Kong Chong explained, this is Zhang Heizong, the #1 ranked hunter in Korea. He was way more impressive than our boy had expected. Kong Chong further added, "People say he's a national hero outside, but since you don't know him, let's move on." "Zhang Heizong, this is Kim Kiryu. His rank is F." Our boy called out, "Zhang Heizong." He replied, "Nice to meet you, Kim Kiryu." Our boy wondered, "Why are you staring at me for so long?" Zhang Heizong saved the proper introductions for later and asked, "Did both of you get suddenly pulled into this place as well?" They both nodded. Our boy was wondering, is that some kind of analyzer? For now, it was certain that they were inside a gate. The rank was X. This was troublesome for them. He thought, what was X rank again? And tried to check it, but his phone wasn't working. Kong Chong came in without a protective case. If he didn't get out quickly, his phone would break from interference. There was something written on that slab. "The symbol of true faith shall become the key." That was a hint needed for the gate? It seemed like the only direction they could proceed was through that door. Zhang Heizong tried to open it, but it didn't budge at all. He requested, "Hunter Kong Chong, please help." He wasn't able to open it with his strength. He guessed he had no choice. So he stepped forward, and they both looked at each other. Zhang Heizong used his power and created a fire explosion on the door, while Kong Chong began releasing his green magic. Our boy was surprised, thinking, among humans who are exposed to mana, S-rank hunters are special. They were an extremely small number of people granted exceptional talent possessors of monstrous abilities. Yet, they were unable to open a single door? But after some thought, they reached a conclusion. This can't be opened by brute force. He needed to go to the statue and told them. Then it looks like there's nothing left to try but this. Kong Chong walked forward, and it seemed there was a hole just perfect for sticking an arm in. There was no way, but if our boy couldn't open the door, they would be pretty much trapped. They had come unprepared, so if things kept going like this, they would run out of food. Zhang Heizong walked towards the lion statue and placed his head inside it, triggering the door to open. He noticed someone beside him nervously looking at their arm. So our boy asked, "What's wrong?" 2 punctures were visible on the person's arm, and their blood had been drained. Our boy was so shocked. When he tried to pull his arm out, no matter how hard he struggled, it wouldn't budge. At that point, he thought cutting off his shoulder might be the only way. Kong Chong turned back and then began walking forward, calling out, "Now that the door's opened, shall we get moving?" But our boy was starting to get a bad feeling about the whole situation. Kong Chong flinched when he saw the lion statue once more. They didn't have time to stand around and needed to get out of there quickly, so he put his strength into it again, and the door opened. They continued moving forward, only to spot yet another statue ahead. Our boy was feeling uneasy about the idea of sticking his arm into the lion statue once more, but it seemed like the only way to open the door. Zhang Heizong asked Hunter Kong Chong to handle opening the next door, noticing that the blood absorption rate had changed. The first door hadn't been a big deal, but the second one had left him feeling a bit dizzy. He added that in these kinds of dungeons, the demands tended to increase, so they should take turns. Kong Chong replied confidently, saying he'd been managing just fine so far. So why didn't he go ahead and lead the way to the end? When Zhang Heizong heard this, he became furious and accused our boy of being uncooperative with the strategy. Kong Chong mocked him, asking if he even knew his hunter ranking. But Zhang Heizong couldn't care less about that and repeated firmly, "Hunter Kong Chong, cooperate." Kong Chong asked, "What if I refuse?" Our boy was beginning to wonder if these two were about to start fighting. Then Kong Chong suggested, "There's another hunter over there. Why don't you ask him?" When he mentioned it, our boy was taken aback, thinking about how the survival rate of an X-rank gate was only 60%. This place may lack monsters, but it was still far from safe a maze where progress was made by offering human blood. The blood-sucking hole fit only one person's arm. In short, this dungeon required one person to be sacrificed, and to make matters worse, they were screwed. Zhang Heizong was furious at the suggestion. "Make an F-rank handle the job when there are 2 S-rank hunters here," he snapped. Suddenly, they all looked forward, spotting a wolf-type monster heading towards them. Our boy was surprised there wasn't supposed to be anything strange here. As the monster leaped toward him, he instinctively closed his eyes and covered his face with his arms, but Zhang Heizong leapt forward, unleashing his fire magic and swiftly slicing the monster in half. Our boy couldn't help but wonder, flames out of thin air? Is this some kind of primitive sorcerer's magic? If that's the case, then his ability must be. Then he noticed a monster was about to attack Kong Chong. Without thinking, he shouted his name, warning him to watch out. Kong Chong quickly turned around and punched the monster square in the face, killing it instantly. Seeing this display of insane strength, our boy couldn't help but wonder, is Kong Chang's awakened skill physical enhancement? Kong Chong noted that the monster's body was weaker, likely on the level of a C-rank beast. Zhang Heizong cautioned that it was too soon to relax. "Look over there," he said. They noticed strange drawings of a monster on the wall. Suddenly, the monster began materializing before them, lunging forward to attack and surrounding them on all sides. Zhang Heizong informed them, "It's not a high-ranked beast, but dealing with this many is going to be a hassle. Take care of the rear, Hunter Kong Chong," he replied, focusing solely on his own job. As the monsters launched their attack, they readied themselves for battle. Kong Chong began pounding the monsters with his bare hands, while Zhang Heizong sliced through them with his fiery sword. Kong Chong unleashed a powerful punch, obliterating a monster in an instant, but the monsters kept coming. Then, Zhang Heizong intensified his attacks, slashing through the horde with his fire abilities. Our boy watched, impressed by their S-rank strength. There were more monsters than Zhang Heizong had anticipated. Thanks to the blood loss, his stamina was depleting at an alarming rate. At this pace, he knew he wouldn't be able to hold out much longer. He looked towards the statue and noticed its eyes becoming red, and realized something. In that moment, a monster was going to attack him, but he turned back and easily cut off the monster in 2 slices hot bread. They were both exhausted because there were so many of them. Our boy was shocked at how they effortlessly slaughtered all the monsters in an instant. Even if he gets his magic back, conquering Earth might prove a bit challenging. Zhang Heizong pointed towards the lion statue, telling them to look. Its eyes were glowing ominously. If they don't offer blood within a certain time frame, a monster wave will be triggered. A monster began materializing from the wall, and our boy spotted it, quickly alerting Zhang Heizong. Before the monster could react, Zhang Heizong swiftly dispatched it with his sword. Does that mean there's a time limit? He wondered aloud. Soon, more monsters began emerging from the dungeon walls, leaving our boy stunned. Zhang Heizong then called out to Kong Chong, who immediately started running toward the statue. As the monsters launched their attacks, Zhang Heizong defended our boy. Amid the sharp claws and vicious strikes, Kong Chong managed to place his hand in the statue's mouth. In the blink of an eye, all the monsters vanished, and the door to the next room opened. Kim Kiryo hadn't expected him to cooperate so easily. Kong Chong glanced around and asked, "Who's next?" Zhang Heizong replied, "Let's take turns." They weren't sure if an F rank would be able to handle it. Kim Kiryo now understood why Zhang Heizong was called a national hero. The moment he discovered Kong Chang's F rank status, Zhang Heizong had immediately taken him off the sacrifice list and protected him when the monsters appeared. Thanks to Zhang Heizong's leadership, they were progressing without a single drop of blood being shed. However, Kim Kiryo was beginning to feel a growing sense of guilty. They were all moving forward, but Zhang Heizong looked visibly exhausted, prompting Kim Kiryo to ask, "Is he okay?" Zhang Heizong replied that he was fine. These sudden gates are usually small in scale. We're probably not far from the exit, however. His face was growing even paler. Luckily, it was now Kong Chang's turn to open the door. Kong Chong turned to Zhang Heizong and told him to stop for a moment. Zhang Heizong was confused, so Kong Chong explained that he had just realized there was no guarantee the exit lay beyond this door. Plus, everyone was starting to feel the strain. Maybe they had missed a clue somewhere. He suggested they go back and check the previous rooms. Zhang Heizong, now angry, snapped back that Kong Chong was just trying to buy time. When attacking an X-rank gate, it was standard procedure to follow the conditions. He knew that as well as Zhang Heizong did. Or are you planning to strike at Zhang Heizong in the chaos when the monster wave hits, just like with the Choi Jin incident? Kong Chong remained silent, listening. Then, without hesitation, he spoke, "I won't drag this out. Open the door." He replied that he would open it right away and told him to stop being so tense. He never said he wouldn't help with the strategy. And he was misunderstanding something. What happened with Choi Jin had been an accident. He wasn't some lunatic who attacked fellow hunters without reason. Since he had a criminal record, he understood why Zhang Heizong didn't trust him. But right now, Zhang Heizong was being way too suspicious of him. Why did Zhang Heizong keep rushing decisions? Was it because he was so eager to get out of here? He opened the door for now. But seriously, he should think about what was said. Even if it was his turn, he would have suggested they go back and check first. He was more reasonable than Kim Kiryo had thought. As he placed his hand in the mouth of the statue, Kim Kiryo couldn't help but wonder, were those rumors just gossip? Zhang Heizong was worried about Kong Chong? He replied, "Don't worry about him. Kong Chong has some recovery potions. He can probably open the door a couple more times after taking them." Zhang Heizong then told him, "Let's push a little further. If they don't find an exit in the next room," he said, "they'll look for another way." Kim Kiryo wondered if, at this rate, they'd have to support Kong Chong. His thoughts were interrupted when he saw Kong Chong hit Zhang Heizong with a bottle. Zhang Heizong, now unconscious, collapsed to the ground right before Kim Kiryo's eyes. Kong Chong was taken aback when the attack worked, even on an S rank. Kim Kiryo was left baffled by Kong Chang's actions. He turned to him and asked, "Have you heard of a gate called Iron Maiden that appeared in Northern Europe? It's almost exactly like this dungeon." To escape, Kong Chong was planning to sacrifice Zhang Heizong, and Kim Kiryo was taken aback by the revelation. According to Kong Chong, the stats for X-rank dungeons showed a survival rate of only 60%, no matter the hunter's ranks. That's not a great percentage to bet your life on, is it? Kim Kiryo thought, feeling uneasy. Kong Chong simply wanted to ensure they followed through with the plan. When Kim Kiryo thought about it logically, it all started to make sense. If this dungeon truly required a human life, they would need a scapegoat. Ideally, it should be Kong Chong or Zhang Heizong. But Kim Kiryo knew he wasn't in a position to choose who would be sacrificed. It was probably best to go along with that S-ranker's plan. Kim Kiryo couldn't help but wonder, though asking an F-rank to take the hit when there were 2 S-ranks present, that didn't sit right with him. It was just wrong. Kim Kiryo told him to wait and promised he would open the next door, so put Jong Haesong down. Kong Chong, surprised, asked, "Did he suddenly grow a conscience?" Kim Kiryo couldn't believe it. He should have just stayed quiet and let someone else take the fall. But no, he would make sure they survived. It didn't seem to Kim Kiryo that they were in a position to negotiate. How could he possibly save Jong Haesong? Kong Chong told him the trial should be ending soon. But when they opened the door, they were shocked to see the exit. Even more surprising was the magical tool on the statue of the woman. Kim Kiryo stepped forward, drawn to it. Kong Chong was certain they needed a living sacrifice, which was why he had gone after Jong Haesong. If he woke up and complained, it would spell deep trouble for him. In Kim Kiryo's hands was a reward, and he soon realized it was a magic tool. Kim Kiryo turned to him and said, "When Jong Haesong wakes up, you might want to apologize with this." Messing with the number 1 ranked hunter wasn't something Kong Chong could just blow over. The association wouldn't let it slide. It would have been so much easier if they had just sacrificed that guy. But since they were still inside the gate, he couldn't help but think was now the time to kill him. He looked at Kim Kiryo and said, "The body will disappear once the gate closes anyway. The only problem is the witness." From his perspective, there was no reason to keep quiet about Kong Chong killing Jong Haesong. Kim Kiryo realized that he was also planning to kill him too. According to Kong Chong, Kim Kiryo was being ridiculous and only needed a small favor. Kong Chong placed his head on Kim Kiryo's shoulder and, with a menacing tone, asked if he could testify that he had knocked out Jong Haesong. Kong Chang's eyesight drastically improved thanks to a rare item called the Dragon's Eye, which he obtained from an A-rank monster known as the Green Dragon. The Dragon's Eye granted him clear vision to spot distant objects, enhanced his magic, and even allowed him to gauge others' awakening levels. With these eyes, he no longer had to squint to see clearly until that moment. Did he just see something wrong? It was our boy unleashing a strange form of magic, something Kong Chong had never seen before. The amount of power wasn't much, but there was a possibility that this person possessed that skill the one hunters worldwide were desperate to find. And when our boy revealed that he was an F-rank hunter, Kong Chong immediately grasped the situation. An F-rank, staring him straight in the eye like this? To ordinary people or low-level awakened ones, high-level awakened ones were like giant beasts. It had been a long time since Kong Chong could even walk into a convenience store without feeling uneasy. The idea of Kim Kiryo being an F-rank hunter was nothing short of absurd. Kong Chong, driven by his growing curiosity, couldn't resist the urge to provoke Kim Kiryo a bit. Whether faced with a sudden traffic accident or a luxurious offer worth hundreds of millions, Kim Kiryo remained entirely expressionless. After all, Kong Chong, who had been the center of attention his entire life, found himself actually appreciating Kim Kiryo's complete indifference. So no, this had absolutely nothing to do with Kim Kiryo's current attitude bothering him. Kim Kiryo only needed to say one thing. There had been friction during the raid, and he had to calm Jong Haesong down. Kim Kiryo asked, "What if he refuses?" Kong Chong replied, "Then he can't go down alone." Actually, Kong Chong could handle the Jong Haesong issue on his own. However, what really intrigued Kong Chong was the kind of ability Kim Kiryo was hiding. Kong Chong thought that if Kim Kiryo were really hiding something, he would react in some way to such an unreasonable threat. But then, to his surprise, our boy agreed, saying he had put Jong Haesong to sleep. Kong Chong was confused, noticing there wasn't even a hint of fear in Kim Kiryo's expression. This suggested he wasn't acting out of fear of Kong Chang's threat. He considered that it might be to avoid conflict entirely. Reflecting further, Kong Chong recalled that Kim Kiryo had mentioned he currently couldn't enter S-rank gates, which implied he had been able to do so in the past. Kong Chong wondered if Kim Kiryo was actually a high-level awakened one. If he had deliberately lowered his magic level to that of an insect, it must feel as suffocating as being gagged and restrained. Because of this, Kong Chong couldn't even guess what kind of awakener Kim Kiryo was. But was there truly a need to lower his awakening level all the way to F-rank? Kong Chong wanted to investigate further, though it might be irrational. They finally made it out of the dungeon, and somehow, our boy had survived. As they walked forward and reached the outside, a massive crowd was waiting for the hunters to come out of the third exit as well. Kim Kiryo was confused by the sheer number of people gathered there. Then the media switched on their cameras and began bombarding our boy with questions. He glanced around and saw that all the exits were packed with onlookers. Reporters were stunned when they saw 2 S-rank hunters, Jong Haesong and Kong Chong, emerge from the dungeon entrance, especially with Jong Haesong collapsed. Then, a young woman approached Hunter Kong Chong, asking him to make a statement. She had many questions, but one took priority. She asked him, why is Hunter Jong Haesong unconscious? She clearly wasn't going to believe he simply fell victim to a gate gimmick. Kong Chong replied, no, there was some friction inside the gate over choosing a sacrifice. Looking over at Kim Kiryo, he added, "So that guy knocked out Jong Haezong." Kim Kiryo thought to himself, lying the moment Kong Chong steps out of the dungeon. When she heard this, she was furious and started shouting at him. Our boy thought it was somewhat fortunate that, at the very least, the association employee was thinking rationally. She accused him. "Wasn't it you who did that to Jong Haezong?" Kong Chong smiled, though he felt a spark of anger, thinking, instead of just standing there listening, why doesn't he say something? Kim Kiryo had no choice, so he admitted, "It's true I knocked out Hunter Jong Haezong." Everyone was stunned, while Kong Chong smiled from ear to ear. Kong Chong explained, "I didn't mean to harm him." She exclaimed, "Impossible, unless it was another S-rank hunter." Kong Chong replied, "It wasn't me." Suddenly feeling dizzy, Kong Chong asked her, "Do I look like I'm in any state to do anything to Jong Haezong right now?" Kim Kiryo was thinking that Kong Chong had also lost a significant amount of blood inside, though it wasn't too serious. Then the media surrounded Kim Kiryo, bombarding him with questions about Jong Haezong, and our boy simply replied, "Yes, I did it." Meanwhile, on the other side, Jong Haezong was furious over the news and was shouting, "Kim Kiryo, he did this to him?" Sometime later, our boy was dining at a restaurant with Yoon Son, who was asking him if the recent incident was true. Kim Kiryo realized why Yoon Son had wanted to meet so urgently today and replied, "Yeah, it more or less went like that." Since Yoon Son had gotten caught up in the X-rank gate, Kim Kiryo asked, "You didn't get hurt?" Yoon Son thanked him for pushing him to safety. Suddenly, Kim Kiryo's phone began to ring. Our boy told Yoon Son to hold on as he received a call. He picked it up, wondering who it could be. To his surprise, it was Jong Haezong. He then told Yoon Son to start eating without him and left his number with the association, wanting to apologize personally for yesterday. Jong Haezong couldn't help but wonder how he should apologize. He had so many questions about what had happened the previous day at that gate. So, he asked himself, was it really him who had put that boy to sleep? Jong Haezong honestly told Kim Kiryo that he had suddenly lost consciousness that day and couldn't remember anything before or after that moment. He suspected it was probably Hunter Kong Chong who had done it, but he wasn't entirely sure. According to his explanation, Jong Haezong remembered getting hit on the back of his head and turning around. The problem was what he saw when he turned around. Jong Haezong asked if Kim Kiryo could explain what happened. It was a difficult situation for Kim Kiryo because the S-rank hunter was clearly confused. Meanwhile, absurd reports were still coming out. Should Kim Kiryo just tell him that he had been forced by Kong Chong? But why would Jong Haezong trust him? Later, Kim Kiryo found out after looking it up that the reason Jong Haezong is called a national hero isn't because he's some kind of paragon of justice, but simply because of his overwhelming number of gate closures. In other words, he's a workaholic who only cares about clearing gates. Would someone like that even bother protecting an F-rank like him? Could he even beat Kong Chong in the first place? While Yoon Son was listening, Kim Kiryo apologized to Jong Haezong and told him that he was the one who had knocked him out, showing a surprised expression as he listened. Kim Kiryo claimed he had planned to offer himself as a sacrifice. He even mentioned he had something to give as an apology, an item that had dropped as a reward for clearing the dungeon. Jong Haezong, angry, asked if Kim Kiryo was kidding him. With his secretary listening to their conversation, he continued, saying this was something they could have resolved with a conversation, and now Kim Kiryo thought he could smooth things over with a measly item? Jong Haezong expressed that his behavior was truly despicable. Knocking him out in a gate made it clear what his intentions were. He was planning to sacrifice him so he could escape safely. Come to think of it, Hunter Kong Chong knew Kim Kiryo. Were the two of them in cahoots from the start? Kim Kiryo tried to tell him it was a misunderstanding. With a menacing expression, Jong Haezong asked if Kim Kiryo was really an F-rank hunter. Kim Kiryo replied that there were certain circumstances. Deciding any further discussion was a waste of time, Jong Haezong said he would be watching him from now on. Kim Kiryo tried to explain further, asking Jong Haezong to wait, but he ended the call. It had been a long call, so Jong Haezong apologized for that. His assistant replied, "No worries, Hunter," and provided him with the information he had requested. The guild had taken immediate action, and all the articles had been removed. He then started reading the comments from the newspaper. She told him that he didn't really need to read those comments. Jong Haezong replied, "Even if the articles are gone, the public already knows. Now that the world sees that S-rank hunters aren't invincible, people are starting to worry." In her opinion, it was pretty clear that Hunter Kong Chong was responsible for all of this. She had looked up the background of that hunter, just as Jong Haezong had requested, and informed him that he was indeed listed as an F-rank. Jong Haezong thought about it for a moment, but something didn't quite add up. He told her, if that hunter was really just an F-rank, Kong Chong wouldn't have let him live. He further added, why would Kong Chong bother making a deal or forcing an F-rank to take the blame? He wouldn't need to go that far. He could have just killed him. Then, his thoughts drifted to Kim Kiryo's eyes as he had watched him fall. They hadn't looked like he was gazing at a person, but rather a discarded object. That cold, indifferent gaze haunted him. Since awakening, Jong Haezong had never felt such a strong sense of unease from anyone. As he thought about it, he told her that it was highly likely his rank had been faked and urged her to contact the association immediately. He would request a reassessment of Kim Kiryo's awakening level. Skills were a common term used to refer to the superpowers of awakened individuals. Every awakened person gained at least one skill at the moment of awakening, but the magic of the planet still had its limitations. Sorcerers could only use the type of magic they awakened with. If they wanted to use a different type of magic, they had to pay an enormous price to obtain a magic tool known as a skill stone. But Kim Kiryo's case is different. He can use any skill available on Earth as long as he meets the conditions. Additionally, he is a genius. The problem, however, is that he isn't able to show off that talent right now. And on top of that, there is an incident that has attracted the attention of the S ranks and others. So he has been scrambling and doing more research, and he has finally found a way to use a magic amplifier. His body is broken, so he can't fully channel magic anymore, but since he can still breathe, he can manage a small amount of internal magic. He plans to use that small amount to fuel the magic amplifier. But of all places, the materials for the amplifier are inside. He stood before the Korean Magic Tower, the one that owned that gate. Suddenly, a man stopped Kim Kiryo, calling him an F-rank hunter, and warned him, "No one gets in here without an appointment." But Kim Kiryo had made an appointment for today. The man mocked him, saying, "That's ridiculous." Waving his hand dismissively, he told him, "Stop lying and go already." Kim Kiryo was about to walk away when suddenly, Yoon-seon called out to him and apologized for being late. He explained that the office had called him unexpectedly and mentioned that it would just be a quick conversation. Kim Kiryo was fine with it. Yoon-seon was here because he had asked for help. The man was taken aback when he saw Hunter Yoon-seong. He immediately began complimenting Yoon-seong, and the two started a conversation, leaving Kim Kiryo in an awkward silence. The man wasn't sure if the guild master was at headquarters today. Yoon-seong told him that she had replied, saying she'd be here. After hearing that, the man reluctantly told them to come in. As they entered the building, the man apologized, explaining, "Due to company policies, F-ranks aren't allowed inside for security reasons." That was the Korean Magic Tower, one of the largest guilds with many hunters under its name. They primarily make their income through hunter activities. Today, they have an appointment to meet the head of this place. She asked if he was there about the gate entry, then handed him a Korean Magic Tower visitor token, saying, "The representative's office is on the top floor. There's an elevator over there, just take it to the 60th floor." They headed to the 60th floor. Worriedly, Kim Kiryo called out to Yoon-seong, saying, "Something's definitely wrong." Meanwhile, somewhere else, a red-haired lady was smirking. He was sure he had pressed the button for the 60th floor, but they were only on the second. He asked if the elevator was broken. Yoon-seong apologized, explaining that he hadn't mentioned it earlier, but it seemed like they were being tested. Seeing his confusion, Yoon-seong continued, "There are rumors about the tower's representative, the guild master, having a strange personality. She acts like she'll definitely meet you, but when visitors arrive, they're thrown into a maze she created." Kim Kiryo believed she would only meet those who passed her test. He suggested they try taking the stairs, but when he opened the door, the situation seemed ridiculous. They had come up from the second floor, yet now they found themselves in the underground parking lot. He quickly told him to just head back to the second floor. He asked how many people had passed the test so far. Yoon-seong wasn't sure. He hadn't heard anything about it, and replied that there might even be no one who had passed. Kim Kiryo scoffed. "Come on, there's no way no one has passed, especially since the staff must know the way." He answered, "Only a few people in the executive office would know." He added, "How are they supposed to clear such a complicated maze by ourselves? Are they expecting us to waste expensive items trying?" He guessed they might be the ones who had urgently requested the visit, but to pull such a prank. What a terrible hobby. "But this maze is well made," Kim Kiryo remarked, almost eager to meet the sorcerer who had created it. "A maze made of magic? It feels like a sense of achievement from my hometown." They stood in front of a door when Yoon-seong asked, should they split up and try to find the way? Kim Kiryo reassured him, "Don't worry. Even if he has become useless, he still has one thing he can do. The magic structure is this simple, and these primitive people can't find the way." Kim Kiryo thought, his confidence growing. Then, he found the path to the top floor. Yoon-seong was surprised. Kim Kiryo had one question for Yoon-seong. "If you want to empty the inside of the elevator door, do you send the elevator to another floor?" Yoon-seong was confused, so Kim Kiryo explained, "This is a vertical shaft. The box should be moving vertically." He told him, "Wait a moment," and Yoon-seong, still confused, looked towards Kim Kiryo. The first thing they needed to do was call the elevator. The second thing was to go inside and press the button for a higher floor. Third, before the door closed, they had to quickly exit. "Move back," Kim Kiryo told Yoon-seong. Then, with a swift kick, he hit the door. Yoon-seong, worried, watched as the door fell, revealing the space behind it. Yoon-seong, still confused, asked Kim Kiryo what he was trying to do. "Let's go, Yoon-seong," Kim Kiryo replied. "Where are we going?" Yoon-sung asked. This floor is connected to the one above by a gate, Kim Kiryo explained before jumping down. He began to fall slowly and landed safely. Yoon-sung had jumped over even more dangerous cliffs inside the gate. Why is this so scary? He asked, looking ahead when someone said, he managed to get there. A beautiful red-haired lady spoke, fastest among all the participants of her maze. She never thought he would find the hidden emergency escape route. That was impressive, but she added, this is where the free ride ends. From now on, he would be facing her, Esther of the Magic Tower. She gestured for them to please have a seat and then called out to Yoon-sung, the hunter. He was surprised. She asked, could you introduce the person next to you? From what I can see, he seems like a skilled analysis worker. She further added, but with your pathetic analysis skills, you wouldn't have been able to get out of the maze. She had set the difficulty high, yet he managed to solve it too easily. Kim Kiryo wondered, is she the one who created the maze? From what he had heard, she seemed to have a unique personality. He introduced himself as Kim Kiryo. She liked people with skills. Kim Kiryo, let's get along well since we share a rare attribute. He was confused, thinking, what does she mean by that? She explained, awakeners with analysis-type skills are very rare, so you can be considered quite special as well. Yoon-sung explained, by the way, Esther here is a curse attribute hunter, one of the only few in the world. Kim Kiryo thought about it, recalling that he had seen information about this company while searching. Esther, the curse attribute awakened, hunted monsters using status ailments like weakness and slow. He would guess that, on Earth, most awakeners were like Jong Haezong and Kong Chong, who had awakened simple fire spells and the ability to enhance their strength. Awakeners like Yoon-sung, who manifested defensive or healing magic, were even fewer. Those with special abilities like analysis, curse, or mind control must be extremely rare. He apologized for not recognizing her right away, explaining that he was a bit out of touch with the news. She replied, it seems you've been holed up in some corner, just working. She had been appearing on broadcasts quite a lot lately. But then again, with his impressive skills as an analysis-type awakener, he must have been busy with requests. Anyway, let's wrap up the small talk here. She asked Yoon-sung, and he mentioned he had business at one of their Magic Tower's gates. He replied, but actually, it's not me who has business there. Kim Kiryo wanted to enter the gate and added, Yoon-sung is just helping me set up the appointment. Since he was such a low-ranking awakener, the staff wouldn't attend to him. She realized he was a rank F. She said that's pretty typical for an analysis worker. Though, you're particularly low even among them. He thought, so, she meant passing the maze she created? He didn't find that particularly strange. She asked, why do you want to enter this gate? If you're thinking about gathering resources, that would be a problem. She added, the materials that come from the trees there aren't even enough for me to use. He absolutely wouldn't touch the area with the trees. She replied, wasn't it the fruits you were after? Even so, it's difficult for me to grant permission. The analysis awakened here is from a different guild. Since you came here with Yoon-sung, does that mean you belong to the Neo Sisters Guild? Anyway, how much money do you think it would take to monopolize a single gate? She wouldn't want to fatten up someone else's guild with profits earned through our hard work. Still, if you really want to enter, I'd prefer if a hunter didn't come. I do prefer to talk guild to guild. She told him, just so you know, I don't like to play favorites or tiptoe around, so make sure to let your guild know that. It would be better for your reputation to calculate the entrance fee fairly from the start. He thought what valuable resources could be hidden in a low-tier dungeon, barely at D rank, for her to act so boldly. She wouldn't even know half of the useful resources inside. He said, but Hunter Esther. He apologized, explaining that he wasn't affiliated with any guild. She was confused, so Yoon-sung clarified that he always worked alone. Kim Kiryo added that she had been referring to him as an analysis worker, but he had never actually done that kind of work before. The only person he knew in the industry was Yoon-sung. She was surprised when she heard him say that helping him wouldn't fill the pockets of another guild. It was truly a personal request. He never intended to enter someone else's gate for free. She told him to wait a moment, and then she started laughing strangely. He was scared, thinking, why is she suddenly licking her lips? Kim Kiryo hadn't even mentioned the mouth-watering part yet, though. She smiled creepily, slammed her fist on the table, and shouted at him. Why didn't you say that from the start? He looked confused. Then, with a sudden burst of excitement, she invited him. Come to the Magic Tower. If he agrees to this, she'll give him the entire gate. He was overjoyed inside when Yoon-sung whispered, large guilds have an overwhelming supply of magic stones and equipment. People with appraisal skills are highly sought after. He thought, these primitives can't even check the purity of a magic stone with their own eyes. To avoid getting scammed in magic stone trades, they'd practically need to carry an appraiser around. Esther offered eagerly. The signing bonus is 500 million. He looked at her with concern, and she misread his expression, assuming he thought it was too little. Esther clutched her head in despair as Yoon-sung tried to calm her down, while Kim Kiryo's mind wandered to the 500 million. Just how many bowls of rice soup could he get with that? She scoffed at him, saying, "At the Korean Magic Tower, we already have plenty of excellent appraisers on staff, so the workload won't be too heavy." He thought, "Just sit at a desk sorting items, and I'll be rolling in money. No need for tough and risky hunter work. I'm definitely saying yes." Then she added, "Plus, you'll only need to work 4 days a week." He was horrified at the mention of the word work. He had reincarnated solely to retire. And now, he was supposed to sign a contract with his own hand and go back to work? Commuting, overtime, morning greetings from the boss, and annoying customer complaints. There was no way. He absolutely refused to work. As they planned to add an incentive to the contract, Kim Kiryo slumped in a corner, despairing, and apologized to her. He would pretend he hadn't heard that offer. She asked him, "How much do you want exactly?" He replied, "It's not about money. To be precise, I have no intention of joining any guild." She looked at him, considering his words, and said, "If that's really how you feel. But are you sure? Since you're rejecting my offer, you'll need to pay to enter the gate on your own." She wondered if he could gather such a large amount. But Kim Kiryo liked to negotiate. He knew of a fascinating material. If she mixed it with concrete or metal to create building exteriors, he added, it would grant a certain level of resistance against skills. Even if a monster attacked, the building could withstand the assault without collapsing. It absorbed mana. Maintaining a barrier around the entire tower would be quite costly, but this alone should be enough to cover the entrance fee. He had more of this item, but he would share it with her. Yoon-seon suddenly realized, the item used to defeat the fire bats? Did that sand really have a mana-absorbing function? He felt a bit hesitant to reveal this now. Since people around here were always poking around the gate, they would have eventually discovered it naturally. He thought, might as well sell it for a high price before it drops to a bargain. She asked, "Does this sand really have that effect? Are you really going to use such important information just to enter that gate?" He wouldn't be trading like this with other places either. She had been acting all high and mighty, but now she was just calling it that gate. He asked, "Shall I promise not to disclose it to others?" She replied, "If that's the case, wouldn't you be at a disadvantage?" He explained, "That may be true, but I really don't need any change." He looked at him and added, "It's just helping out another with the same rare attribute." Some time later, Esther was in her office, sipping coffee, when her assistant called to ask, "Is something bad going on?" She replied, "It's not so much a bad thing. I was just playing a little prank on those guests earlier." Her assistant, hearing this, was shocked. She quickly asked, "You didn't curse the visitors again, did you? Did you do something to those guests earlier? It's not like I put a severe curse on them. The worst they'll get is stubbing their toes on furniture corners." Her assistant asked, "What kind of curse was it this time?" Esther answered, "Sneezing for 30 seconds. She added, "But those from earlier didn't sneeze at all, did they?" When she activated the skill earlier, they should have been sneezing uncontrollably by now. But suddenly, that man looked up and glared at her. He was glaring at her fiercely. He must have known from the very beginning. An awakened who could ignore her curse, even though it affected other S ranks. Where in the world had such a monster come from? Then, a man handed her a sheet, saying, "The appraisal results for the material that the hunter left behind have come in. It really does have the absorption effect. To willingly hand over something like this. That person must want to make a good impression on her too," she thought. "That's actually a bit scary." She told them, "Bring up Kim Kiryo's hunter profile. I need to know what kind of person he is." On the other side, he was vomiting into a dustbin, thinking, "Let's remember this well. Coffee. I will never drink it again." He thought it was a drink meant for valuable guests, so he gulped it down. But then, he realized it smelled like industrial adhesive from Alfuri. She had said it was only for precious guests, and yet she dared to serve him this? Not to mention, they had made eye contact. She asked him if the coffee wasn't to his taste. Trembling, he replied that it was delicious. He couldn't spit it out. If he did, he would look like an alien. One important fact to note here. Currently, Kim Kiryo's body was being controlled by the magic of an alien. Unless someone was more proficient in magic than he was, there was no way to take control of his body through any means, be it drugs, hypnosis, or even a curse from an S-rank hunter. He pressed the button on the vending machine and reflected on the time when he had almost died. Yoon-seon then inquired about the item Kim Kiryo had passed to Esther earlier. When Kim Kiryo said he was the only one who knew about it, he added that he had never heard of such a material until now. Sand that could instantly extinguish the flames of fire bats or strengthen buildings. Yoon-seon asked if Kim Kiryo realized how valuable such a miraculous material was, pointing out that he had given it to the Magic Tower without even registering it with the association. He then asked if Kim Kiryo disliked the Hunter Association. Kim Kiryo replied that he didn't. He had no particular feelings toward the association. He was simply trying to make a good impression on Hunter Esther. Surprised, Yoon-seon asked if Hunter Esther was his ideal type. Kim Kiryo answered that she wasn't, and that he had no feelings for her at all. Finally, Yoon-seon asked what Kim Kiryo was trying to gain from going to such lengths just to reach the gate. The next day, Kiryo woke up to a deep aching soreness that weighed down his entire body. Pushing past the discomfort, he went to check if everything was drying properly. Just yesterday, he had stepped into the gate, striking a deal with Esther and venturing in alongside Yunsung. The hunt had gone smoother than expected, all thanks to Yunsung. His target, the delicate wings of fairy-type beasts, was a vital ingredient for crafting the mana amplifier. Securing them had seemed almost impossible, but with Yunsung's help everything fell into place. With the hardest part out of the way, gathering the rest of the ingredients was almost effortless. He just got one step closer to regaining his former power. Once he can wield magic again, the era of Homo sapiens will be over. Kiryu opens his fridge thinking it's time to get his daily nutrition, but suddenly someone knocks on his door. He wonders who it is, and if it could be a friend or relative of Kim Kiryu. Two imposing men in black suits stood outside as he told them he was coming out now. Regardless, Kiryu thought that if it was someone he knew in life, things could get complicated. Before him stood Wu Yun stating she was from the Hunter Association and asking if she could speak with him for a moment. When he asks why she is here, she firmly instructs him to step outside. She surveys his house while apologizing for the unannounced visit, but explains that they are obligated to handle this matter without prior notice as per regulations. She notices his rundown home and the remnants of a meal, realizing he had eaten noodles. She decides to formally clarify the reason for their visit, stating that they received a report suspecting him of an illegal awakening registration. Upon investigation, he was flagged as a potential fraudulent registrant for misrepresenting his rank. They were required to conduct a re-evaluation of his awakening, so she requests that he accompany them to the Hunter Association immediately. He asks her if it has to be right now, and she confirms, adding that unless he prefers to be taken by force. Meanwhile, the bodyguard looms over him menacingly. A nervous Kiryu resigns himself to the fact that lunch is definitely off the table today. They were driving in a black car, and to explain why Sun Woo-yun had only approached Kim Kiryu now, it was necessary to go back a few weeks. When she first met Kim Kiryu, he claimed his rank was F, but she couldn't believe it and immediately started shouting at him. His reaction was so unlike an F rank that she began suspecting rank fraud from that moment on. Her suspicions only deepened after reviewing his records, which was just a single recorded gate entry, and that was the entirety of his hunter career. Then Kiryu single-handedly defeated a C-rank monster in broad daylight. She couldn't believe such a feat was even possible. If someone like that was faking their rank, it was dangerous, and she didn't know what they might do among weaker hunters. Still, Sun Woo-yun lacked the authority to investigate further, so she simply filed a suspicion report on Hunter Kim Kiryu. Normally, that would have been the end of it. However, a few days later, she was completely stunned by the news, and everything shifted when Jung Ha-sung, who had returned unconscious from a gate, filed a report against Kim Kiryu. She was just a civil servant, but if even a hero like Jung Ha-sung had suspicions, that was an entirely different matter. There was no way Kim Kiryu wasn't concealing his true rank. She had expected him to resist or flee when they notified him of the reevaluation, yet he was surprisingly compliant. Earlier, his house had seemed so small and worn down. Even D-rankers didn't live that modestly. She wondered if he was simply frugal or if he had hidden assets somewhere. Kiryu emerged from a room wearing a gown and inquired about the cost of a reevaluation, explaining that he didn't have any money on him. She informed him that the test fee was around 480,000 won, but since this was an investigation-based reevaluation, there was no charge. However, she added that this only applied if his rank remained unchanged. If rank manipulation was detected, he would be fined and the test fee would be imposed. He wondered if he was at risk, but looked ahead, where some people were taking the test by inserting a device into their mouths. He finds it primitive because with a setup like that, they can't properly measure the power of someone with respiratory issues. Since Kiryu is a heavy smoker, his lungs are in bad condition. He assumes there's nothing to be concerned about. However, Woo-yun guides him elsewhere, explaining that the reevaluation utilizes the latest equipment. She clarifies that the previous method lacked precision for those with lung conditions. He realizes that Earthlings are already aware of such issues and wonders if they have refined the process. She asserts that he had numerous chances to correct his rank voluntarily, but Kiryu insists there has been some misunderstanding. The two bodyguards lift him as she decides to proceed without delay. She adds that he doesn't need to remove any metal items while he silently pleads for them not to go through with it. After a while, the results come out. She examines the report and states that if the results deviate significantly enough to alter his rank, he will be classified as a false ranker. She was convinced he had seen on the news what happens when someone is found guilty of false reporting. But he had never come across such information before. Anxious, he hadn't anticipated such advanced machinery and wondered if his immense mana, previously concealed due to his lung issues, would now be exposed. He couldn't even figure out where to begin explaining, and more importantly, the inspection fee of 480,000 won was even more daunting to him. She is completely taken aback as the results confirm that he falls into the F-rank category with no signs of fabrication. She mentions that his value has increased by about 2 compared to last year's findings, but this level of growth isn't significant, which surprises him. He asks if that value could continue to rise in the future. She refutes the possibility, explaining that while it typically increases like this, it eventually plateaus since the innate awakening value doesn't naturally change. Then Kiryu realizes, this body truly had F-rank mana all along. The reason he kept failing at magic was that the fuel tank had been empty from the start. It wasn't that the output device was faulty, it was his lungs. He followed the same path, but the golem didn't even notice him and only attacked on Yunsung's team. He wonders if it was because the golem never even registered him as an intruder. Worried, Wuyun calls out to him as he gasps for breath. Kiryu realizes he must come to terms with the fact that his reincarnation magic is a complete failure. Now he resolves to live as the weakest low-tier mage on this planet. While walking home, he contemplates that even a great mage isn't immune to failure. He wonders if it's ultimately for the best that he realized it quickly, as this puts all suspicions to rest. She asks if he is certain it's okay, and that he doesn't need to go to the hospital since side effects from tests for low-tier awakened can occur sometimes, especially if he is still feeling dizzy. He appreciates Wuyun's concern but reassures her that he is perfectly fine. But she notices that his expression has been troubled ever since the test. Kiryu can't believe an Earthling is actually concerned about him. Casually, he asks Sun Wuyun how she knew he was home today given that it's a weekday in broad daylight. She responds that it's her awakening skill to searcher. Still puzzled, Kiryu listens as she begins explaining it to him. As they walk, he suddenly stops her and tells her to look down at her feet, leaving her stunned. Someone was lying there dead. Surprised, she looks down closely and realizes it's a raccoon. Kiryu assumes it was hit by a car. He kneels while she mentions that this kind of thing happens around here sometimes. He suddenly picks it up, startling Wuyun, and says such a shame. She wonders if he meant to say it's unfortunate. She assumes it's been dead for a while and cautions him against touching it like that. He can just wash his hands. She flinches as he abruptly lifts it again and decides to leave. He says once she turns into this alley, his house is right there. They are almost there, and she tells him to get home safely. She wonders if he plans to take it and bury it. In Alpori, there were 2 primary materials for golems. One is mineral golems formed from rocks and metals, and the other is organic golems created using animal corpses. In short, Kim Kiryu had just secured a valuable test subject. He considers it fortunate, as on Earth biological samples are scattered everywhere, and decides that once he completes the magic amplifier, he will have to test it on this specimen first. However, Kim Kiryu's actions leave a lasting impression, and Wuyun thinks he has an unexpectedly kind side too. After a while, Kiryu was at home, but his ingredients weren't blending properly. He wondered if the humidity was to blame. It was frustrating trying to get the concentration right without the proper tools. His phone started vibrating just as he was considering regaining his magic, even if it was only F-grade. Already in a foul mood, he wondered who would be calling at this hour. He regrets adding the analysis skill to Kim Kiryu's profile after reading a post that claimed listing skills makes work opportunities easier to find. He hadn't realized it would be visible to outsiders. The moment he added the analysis skill, scouting offers began flooding in. Now he is too drained to even respond, completely worn out. He checks another scouting offer, this one about a chocolate advertisement boasting it as the sweetest in the world. He assumes they had arranged a meeting at the convenience store. He was walking through the dark alleyway, exhausted. But since they had said it was prepared just for him, he figured ignoring it would be rude. He grew confused when he spotted a black van blocking his path. As he got closer, he wondered why a car was parked there. Just as he was about to complain about their lack of manners, the van door suddenly swung open. A man lunged at Kiryu, who was caught off guard as he was leaving. The man swiftly locked an arm around his neck, trapping him in a chokehold and completely overwhelming him. His consciousness slowly faded. After a while, his head throbbed in pain, and he thought that if it had been magic, he could have dodged it, but a physical attack left him powerless. More importantly, he wondered how long he had been unconscious. His eyes were blindfolded, and he couldn't help but think this planet was a terrifying place. As he tried to figure out who would do something so ruthless, he overheard some men discussing him, referring to him as an F-rank. Realizing they were targeting him, he wondered if they had any grudges against Kim Kiryu. They set a deadline but struggled to believe he is truly F-rank, especially since they even sent D-rank hunters to ambush him. Yet he didn't even flinch. One of them orders his partner to check for any damage and fix any scratches. His partner replies that he's not an amateur. Just then, another person arrives, whom they refer to as boss. He introduces everyone to their VIP client and announces that the VIP will inspect the merchandise later, so they should start preparing now. A smirk suddenly appears on his lips as he notices Kiryu. He asks if the guy tied up over there is awake. Kiryu wonders how he knew. The VIP client grabs his blindfold and yanks it off. It was none other than Kong Chong, who greets him with "long time no see." Kiryu demands to know why he's here. Kong Chong explains that lately, There's been talk in the industry about a hunter with exceptional appraisal skills. Someone so skilled that he even cleared the Tower of Magic Labyrinth. But he points out the issue: the appraiser is only F rank. Having high-level skills while being low-ranked makes him an easy target for criminals. So Kiryu asks what he intends to do with him. Naturally, Kong Chong replies that they are going to sell him, explaining that many people want to conceal the true capabilities of their equipment. Since they need personal appraisers, he asks if Kiryu has any idea how expensive appraiser contracts are. He figures kidnapping makes it more affordable. Kong Chong responds that it's not even a comparison, especially considering the maintenance costs. Kong Chong explains that lower ranks like D rank and below are ideal since they lack resistance to brainwashing, making them highly valuable. He has purchased awakened individuals from here before. Once brainwashed, they never betray their owners. Now, the VIP treatment finally makes sense to Kiryu. Kiryu remarks that he was just wondering if Kong Chong had any intention of helping him. Kong Chong scoffs and asks why he would, since he is here as a client. With other business to attend to, he takes his leave. Their boss orders them to take that F grade upstairs as the next item has arrived. Kiryu curses his fate for being reincarnated in this place. They throw him into a cell. One of them notes that the guy doesn't even have a blindfold. The other reassures him that it doesn't matter since he'll be out soon. They slowly shut the door, and Kiryu realizes that moving him here means they aren't selling him immediately. He wonders why they left him alone. Suddenly, he catches a strange scent in the air, a sweet floral aroma. He suspects it's an enchanted tool and assumes it's designed to induce sleep. Judging by its potency, it could put even a B rank to sleep, but that's the least of his concerns since it won't affect a grand mage like him. He removes his shoelaces and prepares to escape. Rubbing them against the ropes binding his hands, he uses friction and heat to weaken them until they snap, freeing him. Even if he's immune to brainwashing, being sold off without magic would be dangerous. His first thought is to report this, but his phone is missing. Of course, he realizes no kidnapping victim's belongings would be left behind. Now he wonders what he can use to escape. He looks at the magical item releasing the scent and picks it up since it's the only thing he has. Two men stood outside the door when they suddenly heard a noise. They quickly turned around as a strong odor began emanating from it. Both covered their mouths in confusion. Suddenly, one of them was struck on the head by the magical item, leaving his partner in disbelief. He gradually lost consciousness and collapsed to his knees. Kiryu emerged holding the magical item. It was certainly effective. His foot bumped with a phone as he thought about escaping quickly before anyone noticed and came his way. He swiftly grabs it, realizing the kidnappers had dropped it, and considers it impeccable timing. He dialed 112, thinking that if he were an ordinary earthling, there was always someone he should contact in a crisis like this. The police answered and asked for his emergency. Kiryu responded that he had been kidnapped, but they couldn't hear him clearly. He tried to repeat himself, but the call cut off. He wondered if the phone was damaged or something. Then he decides to try texting instead, as this should be more effective. But when he asks how long it will take for them to arrive, they keep responding with automated messages. He wonders if they even saw his message and whether it actually went through. That was far from reassuring for Kiryu. He decides to prepare a backup plan, just in case, by messaging Yun Sung. After sending the report, he puts his phone away and retrieves the enchanted artifact again, thinking this is the moment to resume his escape. Two men were walking through the warehouse when they suddenly noticed something unusual ahead. A haze was forming in the air. As they stepped inside, one of them asked did any of their boys dye their hair? While Kiryu swung the magical item, he made a quick motion and swiftly hurled it at one of them, hitting him directly in the face. The second goon realized who it was, but it was too late. Kiryu had already struck him as well. Blood started trickling from his nose as he lost consciousness, and Kiryu knew it. When dealing with magical artifacts, shattering the core is always the fastest solution. He needed to find the exit first, but he had no idea about the building's layout, and all the windows were completely sealed. He was stunned to sense a massive magical surge, strong enough to track someone trapped in an F-rank body. Then it hit him. It was a gate. There was no doubt about it. A gate was just outside this building. He thought, hunters' hunting grounds are usually in open areas like hills or vast plains. Using this as a landmark, he figured he could navigate his way out. The noise had drawn more goons, forcing Kiryu to flee. His first instinct was to head downward. Suddenly, the pain in his leg flared up again. It hadn't been long, yet his legs were already failing him. Kiryu glanced back as they spotted him, and they all rushed after him. Just then, their leader realized something and yelled for them to stop, but it was already too late to turn back. Kiryu swung the magical item, and the smoke spread towards the goons, who covered their mouths. He hurled it at one of them, but someone effortlessly caught it. It was none other than their leader, who mocked Kiryu as F-rank. He swiftly sprang toward Kiryu, clamping a hand over his mouth while driving Kiryu into the wall with his other arm. He warned Kiryu that he usually didn't interfere with the goods he sold, but today, Before he could finish, Kiryu seized his arm and drove a knee strike into his chin. He was sent tumbling and fell unconscious. Others were also unconscious because of the smoke, and Kiryu groaned that everything was unbearable. Worried, he glanced down at the magical item, noticing its mana was already depleted. His luck was terrible today since he had been caught attempting to escape, his leg was acting up, and now the incense burner had failed. As he was thinking about how things were only getting worse, something strange happened to the gate. It had turned into an exit. He could sense the gate's energy beyond that door. He stepped toward it and, considering the typical architectural style of this world, assumed that if there was a door that massive, it must lead outside. He pushed it open, realizing it wasn't even locked. Kong Chong and the kidnappers were stunned when they saw Kiryu near the door. They couldn't believe how item management had become so careless that someone had actually escaped. He was doomed because Kong Changho was there and thought if only Kong Changho had stayed outside. Kiryu realized he must have sensed the magic and rushed over. One of the goons shouted at him, demanding answers about the people on the upper floor. They wondered, had this guy really taken down all those people by himself, and was the report false? Kiryu realized these guys hadn't even noticed he had used the incense burner to take down their subordinates. If he had acted tough, he could have simply escaped. But that was only possible if Kong Chong wasn't here. The boss apologized to Kong, exclaiming that just as a major deal was about to be finalized, this disaster had unfolded. He then asked Kong Chong for a favor, admitting it was a bit much but still requesting his assistance. Kong Chong feigned confusion, prompting the boss to clarify that he needed him to capture that hunter. Since transportation would arrive at midnight, and while their people could handle it, he asks wouldn't it be faster and more foolproof if an S-rank hunter like him stepped in? Kiryu couldn't believe they were assigning such an important task to a VIP. Naturally, Kong Chong agreed, since they were in the same boat, just as the boss had expected. Poor Kiryu was dumbfounded at how easily he accepted. The boss mentioned needing an analysis type awakened and suggested giving him a massive discount in exchange. Kong Chong then turned to Kim Kiryu and asked if he had caught that, assuming the boss already knew the product would start breaking down in several places soon. Kiryu had no idea what to do and wondered when the police would finally show up. Kong Chong whispered the idea of escaping to him since the back road was wide open, saying that if Kiryu made a run for it, he would overlook it this time, considering how hard Kiryu had tried. Deep down, Kiryu wondered if Kong Chong really thought he wanted to be trapped like this. He wasn't sure anymore and called out, asking if he had ever seen him run before, which caught Kong Chong completely off guard. As Kiryu stared at him intently, Kong Chong recalled every past encounter he had with Kiryu and realized it had never happened, not even once. Kong Chong asks if Kiryu won't flee this time either. He decides they should resolve this here, but Kiryu denies it and quickly surrenders, leaving Kong Chong puzzled. Kong Chong mocks him, pointing out that he fought through all the guards to reach here, only to surrender now. Internally, Kiryu denies it, admitting he didn't defeat them and wonders if Kong Chong thinks he's like him. However, Kong Chong never expected him to surrender. At the same time, Kiryu wouldn't trust the words of someone who had already escaped once. Just as he was about to speak, a surge of mana began flowing around them, and they both quickly looked ahead. A man appeared from the gate, asking his superior if he was there. Kiryu realizes it's not a gate, but a magical passageway used for spatial movement. The superior tells him he's right on time as always. The man replies that Koreans value keeping promises. Kong Chong arrives there and asks if this man is the transporter. The boss explains that the transporter is an incredibly rare mage with spatial movement abilities, capable of even transporting people. Kong Chong couldn't believe he was encountering him in person. While the boss introduces Kong Chong to the transporter, Kiryu wonders if he should take this chance to flee. Kong Chong begins releasing his purple energy as the transporter greets him. But suddenly, he strikes the transporter in the face, sending him flying and knocking him unconscious, with blood spilling from his head. Kiryu is taken aback by this, while the boss starts shouting at Kong Chong as the transporter lies motionless on the ground. Kong Chong coldly gazes at the others and explains that he invested considerable time and resources just to deal with this one issue, as awakened individuals who can use spatial teleportation can slip away at the slightest mistake, making it difficult to find an opportunity. He assures Kiryu that whether he was involved in illegal trade or gate occupation, it mattered little to him. However, Kiryu remains confused by the events and doesn't grasp Kong Chang's words. Kong Chong then turns menacingly to the other goons, explaining that smuggling someone out of his jurisdiction overseas is an entirely different matter. One of the goons tells the boss to enter the gate, but Kong Chong is already behind him. He delivers a punishing blow to his face, sending him flying. Kiryu had expected there was no way to defeat the opponent, as being S-rank was not without reason. The hunter ranks originally ranged from A to F, but eventually, hunters with immense power emerged, leading to the creation of an additional rank. The newly introduced rank is S-rank. As the man collapsed before Kiryu, it became evident that S-rankers are the apex of the food chain on Earth. The boss, completely terrified, was pleading for his life. Kong Chang-ho questioned why such a foolish request was made in such a situation, adding that it was useless, which left the boss even more petrified. Afterward, Kiryu heard the boss's agonizing screams. Indeed, it became clear not to cross Kong Chang-ho. Suddenly, the wail of police sirens was heard, and the police arrived outside the warehouse. Kong Chang-ho asked if the police had been summoned, and Kiryu confirmed it, leaving Kong Chang-ho speechless. This caused Kiryu to worry, and he inquired if something was wrong. Kong Chang-ho let him know not to try to involve him with this organization, as stopping his smuggling of Korean awakened people overseas was the sole objective. Kiryu states that it is the police's responsibility. Kong Chang-ho explains that if he knew how slow the police usually are, he wouldn't have said that. Normally, it would have taken days to locate this place. Since most awakened individuals working in public offices left for the hunter industry, manpower has become scarce. However, he adds that this time, things are moving a bit too quickly and assumes he did something. He was curious, but, seeing that it's late, he places his hand on Kiryu's shoulder and decides not to ask further. Kiryu thanks him but wonders where the man is going. He attempts to stop Kong Chang-ho, but Kong Chang-ho leaves, leaving Kiryu to face the police alone. The police begin entering, and the next situation is clear. They all point their guns at him and instruct him to raise his hands. They warn him that if he uses his awakening abilities, the consequences will be severe and ask what happened to the victim. Kiryu replies that he is the one who reported it. They instruct him not to move, stating that he is now in violation of the special law on awakening crimes, which makes him anxious, as it seems absurd. He wonders if they can truly treat a good awakened individual like this. Suddenly, someone arrives, telling the police to wait a moment. It is none other than Woo Yun, calling out to Kim Kiryu. She asked why he was in handcuffs, and the policeman inquired if she knew him. She confirmed, explaining that this was the person who reported being kidnapped. Internally, Kiryu was frustrated as he had told them, but they hadn't believed him. However, he asked Woo Yun how she had arrived. She showed him her phone, explaining that she had received a message from Hunter on Yoon Sung, who said he got the information from Kiryu. Kiryu realized that, fortunately, Yoon Sung had safely received his message. One of the police officers was startled upon seeing the boss's identity card, while Woo Yun explained the situation to Kiryu. The officer quickly called out to the team leader. He explained that they had traced the identities of all the unconscious people here and suspected they were part of a human trafficking ring, which stunned the team leader. He went on to say that recently, a group had been kidnapping awakened individuals and trafficking them overseas, assuming this was the meeting point for their organization, which also surprised Woo Yun. She had heard of it, as their leaders are hidden so cleverly that it's nearly impossible to track them. The team leader then realized that the organization must be eradicated entirely. He asked Kiryu, with some suspicion, if he was the one responsible for the state of the place. Kiryu quickly denied it, saying it was Kong Chang-ho, that madman. But they didn't believe him, and he tried to insist. They warned him to report clearly, and it couldn't be helped. Kiryu finally admitted that he had done what was necessary to protect himself. Meanwhile, the officer had found something in the hallway and asked Kiryu if it was his. Now that Woo Yun thought about it, she realized that Kim Kiryu wasn't even restrained, as he was found in the boss's room and had reported this himself. Furthermore, now that she observed him closely, she noticed that he had almost no external injuries, and though he was about to be sold overseas, he maintained such an indifferent attitude. She began to wonder if Kim Kiryu had really been kidnapped, or if he had orchestrated everything. After that, he says he never intended to do this while gazing at the magical item. But he figures that obtaining such a tool for free is a gain, especially since the police couldn't determine its full effects or even identify its rightful owner, meaning it must be exceptionally rare. He liked that he could recharge it and continue using it, and he was unfazed if someone abandoned him to suffer alone. He could simply laugh it off. He assumes this can only be used on humans and won't affect beasts or monsters. Suddenly, steam starts billowing from the port on the gas. He swiftly shuts off the burner. While pouring the liquid into a glass, he exclaims that this is the ideal color. He marvels at creating something like this from inferior materials on a remote planet and thinks he is truly the legendary genius Archmage. It was the magic amplification elixir. When consumed, it elevates the minimum threshold required for magic activation, enabling temporary use of magic. As he drinks it, he metaphorically explains that it supplies the initial energy, much like a lighter's flint. The potion's effect lasted 5 minutes, just enough time for him to complete a single spell. Magic energy surged through his hands as he prepared to cast his first spell on Earth. He focused energy around his right kneecap and calf muscle, repairing them while casting a physical condition stabilization spell. He wondered if it had worked. When he checked, he realized it had, as there was no more pain. But it was too soon to celebrate, as the journey ahead would be an endurance test. Confirming it himself only reinforced the fact that Kim Kiryo's mana level was abysmal. His mana would be completely drained from just a basic spell. To make matters worse, his lungs lacked efficiency, limiting how often he could use the amplification elixir. Still, he chose not to dwell on it. A success was still a success. Determined to stay as optimistic as possible, he decides to see what he has for today. Suddenly, he heard a knock on his door and went to check, wondering if it was Cian Wuyun again. As he opened the door, he saw an old man standing before him, surprised to find him home, since he was just about to call him. Kiryo realized this man was the landlord. The old man apologized for dropping by unannounced. Calling him student, he asked if this month had also been difficult, but Kiryo was confused. The old man then explained that he hadn't received this month's rent yet, completely catching Kiryo off guard. He showed him a stack of bills saying it had already been 3 months, and he couldn't wait any longer. Horrified, Kiryo wondered how many months' worth of bills had piled up. The old man warned that if he kept this up, he would continue receiving phone calls and needed to pay soon. He had decided to wait only until the end of the month. Kiryo then asked how much the rent was. He replies that the rent is 450,000 won, making it 1,350,000 won for 3 months, which shocks Kiryo. The old man leaves saying that if he can't pay by the deadline, he should vacate the room since he is asking politely. Kiryo closes the door, realizing the situation is serious. If he can't pay 1,350,000 won, he will be forced out, but his current balance is only 3,351, and there are only 14 days left until the end of the month. Adding up the bills, the total amount he needs to prepare, including rent, reaches a staggering 2 million won. He wonders if there is any way to get the money, and recalls that he may have buried some cash somewhere. Suddenly an idea strikes him, and he quickly grabs his phone. He doesn't want to resort to this method, but has no choice, so he dials Kong Chang's number to collect the buried money. The scene shifts to a towering skyscraper where Kong Chang asks if he is referring to the settlement money from the previous traffic accident. He mentions that Kiryo initially refused to accept it when he last reached out, but since he later developed symptoms, he asks how much he needs. Kiryo was nervously staring at his phone and mumbles 3 million won. Unable to hear him clearly, Kong Chang asks him to repeat what he said. He needed 2 million won, but considering the Zhang Heizong case and the recent human trafficking case, he figured he might as well ask for more. He grew anxious when Kong Chang warned that if he didn't say anything soon, he would hang up. Kiryo quickly blurted out that he needed 3 million. Kong Chang, confused, asked if he was serious. He started typing on his phone, finding the request absurd. Then Kiryo received 3 million won from him, and was stunned that he had gotten such a large sum so easily. But he soon realized that after paying off his overdue rent and utilities, there wouldn't be much left. It wasn't even enough to cover meals. He wondered if there was any other way to gather more money, and what a powerless alien mage like him could do. Just then he received a call from Yoon Sung, and realized he hadn't even properly thanked him, yet Yoon Sung was the one reaching out first out of concern. As he answered the call, it struck him that an A-class hunter could earn millions to tens of millions in a single dungeon raid. At a coffee shop, Kiryo thanked Yoon Sung for contacting Cian Wuyun that day. He wanted to treat him to a meal as a token of gratitude, but Yoon Sung said that just a coffee was enough for him, and that he would enjoy it. Feeling uneasy, Kiryo thought he should have just suggested a meal, since even the smell of coffee made him nauseous. The store owner takes their order. Yoon Sung chooses an iced Americano, while Kiryo asks for the best item on the menu, like a vanilla latte. However, he requests that the coffee be left out since he doesn't want anything with a coffee flavor, completely baffling Yoon Sung. The shop owner is equally shocked. Hesitantly, he goes to prepare their drinks, while Kiryo wonders if he just exposed himself as an alien again. Yoon Sung then comments that it was shocking when Kiryo mentioned being suddenly kidnapped. He apologizes, saying he should have gone himself. Kiryo replies that he heard Yoon Sung was handling a dungeon break at the time. Yoon Sung admits the situation was dire, so he had no choice but to rely on Hunter Cian Wuyun. Kiryo reassures him that it's fine since he also worked late into the night. Internally, he decides to start with some light praise to ease the mood. He then asks Yoon Sung if he has only been dealing with dungeon breaks lately, and how long it has been since he last entered a gate, excluding the time he was with him. Yoon Sung, suddenly tense, is unable to answer. With a serious look, Kiryo says he figured as much and asks if he is still afraid to enter a gate, making Yoon Sung even more nervous. Yoon Sung admitted that returning was still difficult for him, just as Kiryo expected. Suddenly facing a high-level monster, being betrayed by a trusted companion, and experiencing the fear of near death, for a college student just over 20, it must have been an overwhelming trauma to overcome. But Kiryo tells him that he can't always rely on him as his only support as an F-rank hunter. He needs to start building his own team again, or prepare to work as a solo hunter. When Kiryo asks if he understands, Yoon Sung pushes down his nervousness and nods. Kiryo notices Yoon Sung suddenly looking down, and wonders if he thinks he wants to cut ties with him. But Kiryo isn't foolish enough to abandon him. so he suggests that Yoon Sung train with him, completely catching him off guard. Kiryu offers to help him with skill usage and mana control, and Yoon Sung is thrilled by the idea. As he sets down his cup, Kiryu feels satisfied with how easily he drew him in. Then he suggests that since they're already on the topic, they should head to a suitable gate right away. Not long after, they find themselves in a dungeon. But everything is going according to Kiryu's plan. They have arrived at the D-rank Gate Maximus Shrine near the cafe. The drop rate of magic stones is terrible, making it an unpopular gate. In other words, it's the perfect place for training. Kiryu decides this spot is ideal and wants to check Yoon Sung's awakened attribute, which he claimed was defensive. He instructs Yoon Sung to show him his main skill first. He agrees but feels a bit nervous about demonstrating it in front of Kiryu. He releases his mana energy, forming a shield around his body, and forcefully slams it down with his armor. The shield of protection activates, generating a mana barrier in front of him. The more mana he consumes, the larger the barrier becomes. Yoon Sung asks how it looks. At first, Kiryu is confused and questions why the shield only blocks the front. Yoon Sung explains that's just how the skill works. It has been that way since he first awakened. Kiryu likens it to watching a chimpanzee use a knife for the first time and wonders where to even begin teaching him. When Kiryu tells him the skill needs to protect not just the front, but all directions, Yoon Sung looks completely lost. Kiryu explains that the shield should wrap around his body like a glass dome. When Yoon Sung tries, he manages to increase the size, but the shape remains unchanged. Frustrated, Kiryu sees him as utterly clueless and demands he try again. He instructs him to visualize his core as the center of the skill and spread his mana outward like a crystal ball. Yoon Sung hesitates, unsure if he is doing it correctly. Kiryu tells him to stop overthinking and focus, warning him not to lose the image in his mind. Yoon Sung nervously agrees. From then on, Yoon Sung continues training under Kiryu's guidance. The process is grueling for both of them. However, after 20 minutes of intense effort, they finally see results. Yoon Sung excitedly exclaims that it's working, but he is unable to move, and the barrier slowly starts breaking apart. Kiryu reassures him that it's fine. He will improve with practice. At least he succeeded once. Once he hones his control, he will be able to create a shield with no blind spots. Grateful, Yoon Sung thanks Kiryu, admitting he never imagined he could use his skill this way. Kiryu replies that a skill's true potential ultimately depends on the user's mindset. In reality, mana is heavily influenced by the user's mental state, so those with a slightly arrogant and confident personality have a higher chance of becoming great spellcasters. Yoon Sung asks what the next training exercise is. This time, Kiryu decides on practical combat, since Yoon Sung needs to use his skills against monsters regularly to improve. The scene shifts to a towering golem, its massive sword crashing against Yoon Sung's barrier. Seizing the moment, Yoon Sung leaps forward and strikes, but the monster remains unscathed and retaliates with incredible speed. His barrier holds firm, keeping him safe. As the golem's weapon shatters, Yoon Sung sees an opening. He quickly creates some distance, then charges in with full force, obliterating the beast in an instant. From the sidelines, Kiryu exclaims that the power difference is overwhelming. Then it's his turn. He heard that the mana stones and the gem on the golem's forehead are valuable. While Yoon Sung fights, Kiryu quietly collects materials from the fallen golems, casually reminding him to be careful while hunting. He thinks using skill training as an excuse to hunt while pocketing an A-rank's dropped items is a clever strategy. In other words, he is secretly stealing someone else's loot. He wonders why he should bother fighting monsters himself, when this alone could keep him going for a month. It's much better than asking Yoon Sung to hunt for him directly. If he upsets an A-rank, it could spell trouble. He decides to gather as much as possible without Yoon Sung noticing. He asks Yoon Sung if he's getting the hang of it, but something about his reaction seems off. Horrified, Kiryu wonders if he has caught on to his little scheme. A-rank hunter Yoon Sung had never experienced awe in his life. He never respected any of his mentors during his school years. He had never genuinely admired the achievements of sports stars praised on TV. He simply thought there are always people who achieve such things in the world. That was the extent of his feelings. But today, Yoon Sung finally grasped the meaning of awe and couldn't fathom how extraordinary Kiryu was. Yoon Sung couldn't comprehend how Kiryu discovered the hidden potential of his skill after seeing it just once. Moreover, his teaching style felt effortlessly natural. Yoon Sung had never heard of a skill that identifies flaws in others' abilities and believes he's not even an analyzer-type awakener, since he witnessed firsthand that he is a hunter with combat prowess. That emotion detection skill he used was likely something he obtained from a store item. Yoon Sung assumes there was no way his emotional skill could be particularly remarkable. Then and wonders just how powerful is his ability for him to offer such advice. Kiryu calls out to him, snapping him out of his thoughts. He asks if he's starting to get the hang of it. Yoon Sung feels embarrassed, realizing that even after being taught by such a skilled person, he still can't use his skill properly. He replies that he's trying, but it's not going well. Apologizing for taking up Kiryo's valuable time, he assures him that he'll master it as quickly as possible. Kiryo tells him not to rush. If he can't do it today, they can continue next time. There's no need to hurry, since he isn't returning to hunter activities right away. When Yoon-sung tries to object, Kiryo reassures him that he has plenty of time as an F rank. Feeling emotional, Yoon-sung reflects on how Kiryo selflessly shares his knowledge to help him regain his confidence. From the moment they met, he felt Kiryo was truly special. Wanting to repay his kindness, somehow he asks if there's anything he wants from him, but the question makes Kiryo nervous. He weakly denies it, saying not at all. Yoon-sung expected that response. He knows Kiryo isn't someone driven by selfish desires. He wonders how absurd his question must have sounded for Kiryo to stutter, knowing he's not the type to be swayed by money like so many in modern society. Yoon-sung once thought he could achieve anything after awakening as an A rank, but now realizes he can't even properly express his gratitude. He assures Kiryo that he won't overdo it today and decides to wrap things up. As they head out, Yoon-sung resolves to train diligently under Kiryo to build his strength. Someday he is determined to repay him by being of help. Kiryo, feeling nervous, recalls telling him he didn't want anything. He wonders if Yoon-sung suspects something but quickly dismisses the thought. Yoon-sung seems completely uninterested in taking advantage of him. So perhaps to an A-rank hunter this is nothing more than a 10-1 coin. If that's the case, Kiryo thinks C-rank or B-rank gates might be worth looking into. Just selling today's spoils will be enough to cover his rent. He decides to treat himself to some gukbap later. As they step out of the gate, Woo-yeon is already waiting for them. She greets Hunter Yoon-sung, noting that he took quite a while even though it was just a D-rank gate. She explains that she came to deliver a message to Hunter on Yoon-sung, but then shifts her attention to Hunter Kim Kiryo. With a sharp gaze, she asks if he just came out of the gate as well. She reminds him that he was recently suspected of grade fraud and had to undergo a reevaluation. She never expected to see him stepping into an illegal gate right after clearing that accusation. Kiryo silently curses at the situation. When Yoon-sung tries to explain, Kiryo quickly interrupts, claiming that he entered as a porter and was working under Yoon-sung. But Woo-yeon isn't fooled. She questions what he could possibly be carrying in that small bag to call himself a porter. She also warns Hunter Yoon-sung that getting involved in illegal gate entries like this could cause serious problems. Kiryo argues that according to association rules there's no issue. She acknowledges that the rules don't prohibit porters from entering. However, she clarifies that the rule was meant for actual porters, not as a loophole for people like him. She warns him, asking why he doesn't realize his attitude raises suspicion. Normally an F rank would follow the rules to avoid danger, but ignoring rank restrictions like this naturally makes people wary. She requests his cooperation with the association, which dampens Yoon-sung's mood. With no other option, Kiryo reluctantly agrees for now. Since she had been treating him kindly earlier, he had momentarily forgotten that this awakened person was a B rank. Even at B rank, she was still strong enough to tear apart a lion with her bare hands. Provoking unnecessary anger wasn't worth the risk. She then asks Yoon-sung to follow her for a moment, as she has a message regarding the dungeon break response area change. Yoon-sung, unable to refuse, complies, and Kiryo realizes that even as an A-rank hunter can't act recklessly. Before leaving, Yoon-sung waves at him. With that, Kiryo knows his current money-making method is no longer an option. He walks away thinking there's nothing more he can do now. But he already has a backup plan, having anticipated something like this. As he departs, Woo-yeon silently glances back at him. The next day, Kiryo was looking at something on his phone since, lately, it had become a habit to gather hunter information as soon as he woke up. He had also completed analyzing this item, as it was no surprise there hadn't been any information on it until now. This bracelet first emerged in that X-level dungeon. He kept it just in case Jong Haezong contacted him again and wondered if he should give up at this point. The magic tool he had treasured finally looked worn out for the first time today for some reason. He decided to head out at a steady pace. The experiment he was conducting today was somewhat dangerous. After that, he arrived at the location and had put on his shoes. He wondered where he was now. Suddenly, he discovered what he had been searching for, a low-risk F-rank gate. Gates are categorized into blue and red gates. This was a blue gate supposedly without a boss. In the vast field surrounding the gate, small monsters kept appearing. If he eliminated a set number of monsters, the gate would close. He had come here today to hunt. This place had relatively unrestricted entry. He considered earning some living expenses by hunting F-rank monsters suited to his level. Kiryo shielded his eyes from the glaring sunlight and stood inside the gate that resembled a lush forest. In front of him, several goats grazed on the grass. They were broken mountain goats, their cries resembling a shattered violin. He took out a tube filled with green liquid, thinking it appeared mild on the surface, but was a formidable monster vying for the top ranks among F-class. He started drinking the liquid from the tube, assuming it would yield a good amount of money. As his magic power surged, he sensed an aggro that was impossible to ignore. He conjured a fireball on his fingertip, muttering that it had finally noticed him. Locking onto the broken mountain goat, he remarked that it was too late since his spellcasting speed surpassed anyone on Earth. He then launched the fireball forward, declaring, "Turn to ashes, little monster." As the fireball neared it, gradually began to fade. After traveling a little farther, it completely vanished, leaving only a faint scorch mark on the goat's head. The monster grew furious, releasing steam from its nose. The goat charged at Kiryu, leaving him completely terrified. He immediately started running, knowing this would happen with his F-rank magic power. When he looked back, the goat had gotten even closer, making him scream in fear. He couldn't believe how fast it was. He ran as fast as he could with just a little more distance left to cover. As he sprinted, the monster was about to bite him, but he barely dodged it by escaping through the gate. Nearly collapsing from exhaustion, he felt like he had barely survived. He turned back to check the gate, making sure the creature wasn't following him. Realizing his own condition, he admitted that his magical state was worse than he thought. On top of that, his lung capacity was terrible. Just a bit of running had left him completely drained. Suddenly, someone called out to him. He turned around and saw a man commenting on how long it had been, but he didn't recognize him. When Kiryu asked who he was, the man realized Kiryu didn't remember him and asked if he was still active as a hunter. He reminded Kiryu that they had earned their hunter qualifications together and entered a gate, where he had been the team leader back then, but Kiryu couldn't even recall a vague memory of him. He thought that if this man knew the original Kim Kiryu, he shouldn't speak recklessly. The man listed several names and asked if he was one of them. Kiryu corrected him, saying his name was Kim Kiryu. The man then started sharing stories, which left Kiryu puzzled, making him think this earthling talks too much. But the man tells him not to claim he's soloing. Kiryu agrees since he only came for a quick hunt. The man reminds him that he had promised to speak casually with him, but Kiryu couldn't remember anything like that. Kiryu apologizes for being forgetful lately and decides to drop the formalities. He finds it uncomfortable but can't just walk away. His failed possession magic left gaps in his memory, and this earthling might be the key to filling them. Since they've already met, Jae-hyun suggests teaming up for the day. He explains that going solo is tough, and that his team just happens to have an open spot. Pointing ahead, he asks if Kiryu sees that group over there, and adds that they're the ones he's currently working with. The one with the axe is their team leader, a D-rank hunter. No wonder he looked the strongest among them, Kiryu thinks. Jae-hyun tells him that if he agrees, they can enter the gate right away. But Kiryu apologizes, saying he's already used up all his mana, so hunting would be difficult. He's even taken today's mana booster. Jae-hyun reassures him that it's fine since he wasn't looking for a hunting partner anyway. Kiryu is confused, so Jae-hyun clarifies that the person who canceled today's schedule was their porter. The team was worried about carrying their backpacks themselves, so he asks if Kiryu could help out as a temporary porter for the day. Kiryu is thrilled when they mention they will reward him generously. He thinks that if it's just carrying supplies, it wouldn't be a bad idea to observe how a typical hunter team operates while Jae-hyun remains unnoticed, wearing a sinister smile. After that, they stood inside the gate facing a rhino-like monster restrained by a red-colored substance. Their leader drew his weapon and cautioned them to stay alert. The monster grew even more enraged, shattered the stones that had held it captive, and charged at them with immense speed. However, the hunters swiftly readied themselves using their abilities. One of them summoned tree vines to obstruct its path, while another hurled a whip-like weapon to ensnare its neck. The monster collapsed to the ground, immobilized by their combined efforts. Their leader leaped into the air, weapon in hand, and delivered a decisive strike, while Kiryu observed the battle from the sidelines with amusement. Finally, the rhino-like monster was vanquished, and they celebrated their victory, while Kiryu observed that this team had remarkable coordination. They diverted the target from the front, lured it and then restrained it from behind with spellcasters, before delivering the final blow. For him it was simple yet effective, almost like watching adept primitive hunters bring down a mammoth. Kiryu assumes that with this level of skill they can handle most F-rank monsters, and they decide to seal the gate now. The team leader tells him to pass over his backpack, saying he will take it from here. The leader remarks that he saved them since who would have expected the irresponsible porter to cancel at the last minute? He adds that he likes him, saying he thought Kiryu would wear out quickly since he is so skinny, yet he carried that load effortlessly. Even so, he had already intended to be generous since Jae-hyun knew him, but now in even higher spirits he began counting a wad of cash before the eager Kiryu. He urges him to accept the money, but Kiryu says it seems excessive for a porter's pay. The leader assures him that since he filled in on such short notice, he deserves a bonus. Kiryu believes he has earned his loyalty now. Then, the leader asks if Kiryu is available tomorrow. He explains that they have another F-rank gate scheduled, but no porter, as finding someone new would be troublesome. More importantly, he adds that he would really like Kiryu to take the job while glancing at the bracelet on his wrist. After that, the scene shifts to a hotel, where they talk about the item on Kiryu's wrist, an X-rank gate artifact that Jae-hyun was completely certain about. He He says the bracelet's details were only made public yesterday and questions how counterfeits could already be on the market. The leader remarks that the guy looked like a total beggar, and Jae-hyun says that bracelet alone would let them take it easy for a while. In the world of hunters, some abandon the challenge of facing dangerous, ferocious beasts and instead set their sights on easier prey. Mainly novice hunters who lack experience with gates and overspend on protective gear. These predators, much like those that prey on the weaker members of their own kind, are referred to in the industry as frogs. Even worse, their crimes extend beyond mere extortion, often escalating to sadistic killings. The next day, Kiryu sits on a bench unsettled by something that has been weighing on his mind since yesterday. When a message pops up on his phone, he notices no one else has arrived and wonders if he came too early. When he spots Jae-hyun, it feels like he is on the verge of recalling something. Suddenly, someone calls out to him. It was the same party he had previously hunted with. Kiryu asks if he is certain he will pay the same amount as yesterday, and he confirms it. Since he pulled out freshly minted bills, and the gate is just around the corner, they decide to head in immediately. In the dungeon, they had defeated a monster, and were moving forward while the ground was covered in lava. Kiryu asks Jae-hyun if this F-rank blue gate has 2 bosses, and he confirms it. Kiryu thinks that typically gates collapse once the boss is defeated, but if someone is still alive inside, the gate won't close. If he had more time, he'd like to thoroughly investigate how gates function, but for now he focuses on the task at hand. Since he can earn this much just by working as a porter, he won't have to con that kind-hearted guy anymore. Kiryu casually calls out to the group and asks if this path looks familiar, but they seem puzzled. So he gestures toward a nearby monster, and points out that the corpse of the one they killed earlier is still lying there, assuming they've gone the wrong way. The leader subtly signals Jae-hyun, while Kiryu is asking if anyone has a pathfinding skill. Jae-hyun grabs a glass bottle filled with red liquid, takes aim at Kiryu's head, and suddenly smashes it against him. As Kiryu collapses, he tells him not to worry too much and menacingly says to just take a nice nap, since everything will be over soon. Kiryu can't comprehend why his fellow hunters are attacking him, and wonders if they have some twisted obsession with beating up their own kind. To his surprise, Jae-hyun remarks that Kiryu is holding out better than expected. The leader dismisses the concern, saying it doesn't matter, as one of these stun potions can knock out an F-class in 5 seconds. Kiryu wonders if they really believe this pathetic magic tool will affect him when his resistance to stun magic is flawless. It's not that he's struggling to stay conscious. It's just that the stench is driving him insane. One of them hesitantly notes that it's been over 5 seconds now and something feels off. Suddenly he senses a strange vibe, and his instincts scream at him to run. Without hesitation, he takes off, but the goons are quick to notice and immediately give chase. As he considered dropping the burdensome bag and escaping, a tree vine suddenly shot out and snared his ankle as he ran. He was left dangling upside down, controlled by one of the goons. The goon remarked that he had been hobbling around just last year and demanded to know how he had recovered. Kiryu responded that it wasn't really relevant right now and questioned why they were doing this to him. The leader questions why he hasn't passed out yet. Jae-hyun has no idea either, and assumes the only item he possesses is the bracelet. The leader commands him to drop Kiryu, and he crashes to the ground in pain as his head pounds. The leader sneers, calling him an F-rank, and threatens that if Kiryu dares to run again, he will rip out every single one of his teeth before killing him. Kiryu surrenders, asking if he can at least understand why this is happening to him. When he looks up, he notices them fixated on his wrist, and realizes the bracelet is peeking out from his sleeve. As he moves his hand to the right, their gazes follow, and when he moves it to the left, they shift again. He asks if the bracelet is the reason and realizes that's why they were trying to knock him out. According to Pixawiki, this bracelet can block damage twice. It can nullify any attack without limits, even strikes from S-rank monsters up to 2 times. The very equipment he wore for protection has ironically put him in danger. He realizes that if handing over the bracelet was enough to resolve the situation, he would do it, but these guys plan to kill him and seal the gate to erase all evidence. The leader threateningly demands Kiryu surrender the bracelet, immediately saying he might consider sparing his life if he complies. Kiryu yells at them to stay back before he expends both charges. He thinks at the very least this will ensure his survival for now. If they so much as lay a hand on him, it'll likely be considered an attack, and once both charges are depleted, the bracelet will be nothing more than a useless trinket. But at this rate, they will remain locked in a stalemate. He calls out to Jae-hyun, pleading if he can just let him go. Kiryu promises that if he is spared, he will keep today's events a secret. He isn't seriously injured, so what could he even report him for? But Jae-hyun finds it absurd, since what if he starts running his mouth the moment he gets out? Kiryu asks if it was that obvious. The leader furiously calls out to him and suddenly kicks him in the face. Grabbing his collar, he demands to know if he's messing with him. Being an F-rank and using such high-quality gear is seriously ticking him off. He starts pummeling his face and dares him to activate it. He warns that the moment the item's protection wears off, it'll be his funeral, while the others stand by and watch him get beaten. Kiryu suddenly tells him to wait a second and promises to hand over the item, begging him to stop for now. He tells him he should have done that earlier. As his hands tremble, Kiryu wonders if this is what it means to be an F rank. He feels the weight of violence and mockery and realizes how painful it is to be weak. But if he hands this over to them, it will be the end, and he fears it might also be the end of his life. At that moment, someone began running towards them. The leader heard the footsteps and wondered who had barged in. Suddenly, he was shocked, and no one could believe how that person was there. It was none other than Yoon Sung. 30 minutes earlier, Kiryu had been texting with Yoon Sung, who felt relieved that despite losing his value, Kiryu still treated him the same. But to Kiryu, he was nothing more than a tool to access high-tier gates. After the last incident of unauthorized entry, Kiryu had assumed he wouldn't come looking for him again. But Yoon Sung believes he is already dedicating his valuable time to improving himself and wonders if Kiryu is the noble person he was destined to meet. He must give this to him when they meet later. 20 minutes later, Yoon Sung is still waiting for Kiryu. He checks the time and questions if he's running a bit late since it's been some time since Kiryu entered. He remembers that Kiryu had mentioned going to an F-rank gate and it shouldn't normally take this long. He wonders if an abnormal mutation could have caused the gate's rank to rise unexpectedly. He assumes that's probably not the case. Afterward, he stands before the gate, but decides to go and investigate just in case. He enters the dungeon and scans his surroundings. His worries fade since it's just an F-rank gate, and he assumes the monsters have already been cleared. Then he searches for Kiryu. Suddenly, he snaps his head around at the sound of something. He dashes in that direction, realizing it's Kiryu. When he comes to a halt, he is stunned by the sight before him as the goons are mercilessly beating Kiryu. They all freeze in shock upon spotting Yoon Sung. Kiryu desperately pleads for help, shouting that these guys are trying to rob and kill him. Yoon Sung wonders if he is experiencing hallucinations since the Kiryu who was always composed and commanding is here acting like this. He dismisses the thought, deciding to consider it later. He realizes they are frogs. He grows angry and begins releasing his mana. Yoon Sung menacingly advances towards them, calling them scum that prey on fellow hunters. The leader orders his subordinates to flee, but Yoon Sung swiftly grabs his head and slams him to the ground. Yoon Sung can't believe there are frogs even at this low-rank gate and thinks there's no need for complex tactics against these guys. They all attempted to flee in fear of Yoon Sung, who swiftly leaps towards them. The only thing he needed to be cautious of was controlling his strength enough to avoid killing them. He slams one's face into the ground and quickly swings his shield, striking another goon. He restrains one of them by grabbing his collar and tossing him to the ground like a rag doll. He steps on Jae-hyun's body, inflicting intense pain. But even then, these individuals were far too weak, and Yoon Sung considers them possibly F-rank, wondering if Hyung truly lost to such insignificant hunters. Kiryu calls out to him, snapping him out of his thoughts. He expresses his gratitude, saying he owes his life to him. Concerned, Yoon Sung notices his wounds and asks if he's all right. Kiryu reassures him that he's fine and realizes Yoon Sung came in because he took too long. He apologizes, knowing it must have been difficult for him to enter the gate alone, and that he made Yoon Sung suffer needlessly. Speaking of which, he wonders how much time has passed since Yoon Sung entered the gate alone. Normally, just hearing the sounds from the gate would have terrified him. Yoon Sung had been anxious, fearing Hyung might be in danger due to the gate's mutation. Suddenly, he questions whether all of this was part of Hyung's plan. Kiryu decides they should leave the gate first, and once they do, they need to report these people. He then wonders why he didn't realize sooner that Hyung showed no signs of shock even after being attacked by fellow hunters, as if he had foreseen it. Or is he just overthinking it since there's no reason for Hyung to create such a scene? Kiryu then tells him that if his awakening level had been higher, he would have undoubtedly teamed up with him. Kiryu explains that being strong is important, but more than that, Yoon Sung had the courage to step up and save others, and hunters like him are rare. Kiryu hoped he would recognize how exceptional he is, which leaves Yoon Sung speechless. As he replays Kiryu's words in his mind, tears start streaming down his face. Looking back, he realizes the reason he couldn't form a new team until now and remained stuck for so long was because of that incident. As a defensive awakener, he failed to protect his teammates, which made him avoid interacting with new hunters. But now he was forced into a situation where he had to save someone he knew who was in danger. He wonders if Hyung intentionally created a scenario similar to that time to help him experience success. He becomes convinced that everything was part of Hyung's plan, calling him to this gate from the very start, and even allowing himself to be attacked by low-level awakeners. Those wounds he sustained were all for the sake of the act to find someone willing to go this far for others. Yoon Sung asks why he always looks out for him, but Kiryu doesn't understand what he means, so Yoon Sung brings up how he guided and helped him. Kiryu simply replies that he's a good kid, and that's all that matters, which deeply moves Yoon Sung as they begin leaving the gate. As they finally step outside, he asks Yoon Sung if he can report them on his behalf, and Yoon Sung agrees. Kiryu apologizes, but decides to start training tomorrow since he needs to head home now. Confused, Yoon Sung says he should be going to the hospital and asks if he should call a healer he knows. Kiryu refuses, saying it's a hassle, and that he'll take care of it himself as he starts walking away. But Yunsung tries to insist. He wonders what kind of F rank handles their own treatment and how expensive potions even are. Unless, is he finally admitting that he's been faking his ordinary F rank act in front of him? But Kiryu was in excruciating pain, especially around his ribs. A few days later, Kiryu examined his wounds and wondered just how many bones those guys had broken. Regardless, he was finally back to normal, though it had been the worst week of his life. He had been kidnapped by human traffickers, nearly killed by robbers who were after his belongings, and now he had to report to the association. He questioned why they couldn't do their job properly even once, and why he had to keep explaining his situation over and over again. He finished getting dressed, but the whole ordeal was exhausting. Of course, complaining wouldn't change anything. He decided to conceal the mark with his sleeve. Later, he discovered that the item was worth a fortune at auction, but it wasn't nearly enough to buy his life. Still, he couldn't bring himself to part with it so easily. For someone like him who lacked magical abilities, there was no telling when or how it might prove useful. Suddenly, Kiryu was at a loss for words when he spotted a sports car parked right outside his house. As the tinted windows slowly lowered, he was stunned to see none other than Kong Chang-ho. Kiryu averts his gaze, avoiding eye contact and thinking that if he had known this would occur, he would have simply walked away without looking. Kong Chang comments that he knows he saw him and asks where he's headed at this hour. Kiryu had business at the association and ended up staying in the shower too long. He says he's busy, so he decides to head out and wishes him a great Monday. But Kong Chang menacingly orders him to get in. Without hesitation, he gets into the car while Kong Chang was still warning him not to make him say it twice. Kiryu isn't scared or anything. As a cultured and refined alien, he's simply responding to a proposal to resolve this through conversation. But he wonders why this guy came all the way to his house. He assumes it's about Zhang Heizong's secret, but he's kept it well hidden until now. Kiryu presses the accelerator and mentions hearing that he was attacked by frogs, hunters who prey on other hunters for a living. But Kiryu can't figure out how Kong Chang even knows about them and confirms it. Kong Chang also heard Kiryu got injured, so he came to check. Surprised, Kiryu asks what exactly he came to check. Kong Chang replies that he wanted to see if Kiryu was seriously hurt. He recalls Kiryu getting caught in an X-class gate and even being kidnapped. At this point, he's starting to wonder if Kiryu enjoys the risk. By the way, Kong Chang has a surprise for him. He tells him to open the glove box, and Kiryu opens the storage compartment near his knees. It was a recovery potion. Kong Chang notes that Kiryu probably doesn't need it right now, but since he brought it anyway, he might as well take it. Kiryu wonders if this is a potion from Earth, and recalls that such things were common back home too. When someone injured a tentacle, their friends would bring them recovery potions. It feels like giving fever medicine to someone with a cold. Accepting small gifts like this is simply polite, so he thanks Kong Chang and decides to make good use of it. Kong Chang remarks that Kiryu doesn't even seem surprised. Internally, Kiryu disagrees. He's actually quite surprised that someone like Kong Chang would suddenly do something nice, but there's no way he's risking drinking it. Instead, he takes it for research, since who knows if it's been laced with something suspicious? As they arrive, he tells Kong Chang they're here and tells him to get out. Kong Chang asks if he didn't say he had business at the association. Kiryu never expected him to actually drive him here. He assumed Kong Chang had some other errands for him to run. Kong Chang assures him he just stopped by to check on his condition today. Kiryu unfastens his seatbelt, and Kong Chang warns him not to die doing something reckless. Kiryu appreciates Kong Chang-ho's concern, but questions why he is being so thoughtful given that he just said he would kill him if he didn't take care of himself. Kong Chang responds that he is interested in fostering talented hunters in Korea and sees potential in Kiryu, so he prefers not to harm him. Kiryu assumes he is asking him to keep the Zhang Heizong matter a secret. Kong Chang tells him to carry on and decides to meet him again sometime. As Kong Chang drives away, Kiryu is left bewildered by his behavior and sees him as a devoted patriot. But he also questions whether an awakened who wouldn't hesitate to kill their own kind for personal gain could truly have such noble intentions. Above all this is what Kiryu is most intrigued by. He looks down at the potion and wonders why Kong Chang-ho would be interested in an F rank like him. He believes the answer to this perplexing question will one day reveal itself by chance. Sometime later, Kiryu is stunned to see an online post detailing horrifying crimes and how the motive behind serial killings often stems from the desire for enhancement. He wonders if this could really be the reason. According to a site where Earthlings classify magical skills, greed enhancement is a skill that allows one to kill the strong and steal their abilities. Kiryu questions whether he is simply overthinking by associating Kong Chang-ho with this after reading the article. He takes a moment to reflect on Kong Chang-ho's actions. First, he once offered him a hunter activity sponsorship. Second, he was particularly concerned about promising domestic awakened being recruited overseas. Third, he advised him not to die. And when he pieces all of this together, he suddenly envisions Kong Chang strangling him to death and frantically reassures himself that this isn't the case. He regrets ever catching the attention of that S rank in the first place. But now there's only one choice left. He must deal with this useless F rank body immediately, either by transferring his soul to another corpse or repairing his lungs. A few hours pass, but that's just how research works. Just because he has made up his mind doesn't mean results will appear instantly. He reincarnated to take a break, and wonders so why is he still working even after being reborn? Suddenly his phone rings. It's an unknown number. He answers but is confused when no one responds and asks who it is. It turns out to be Woo Yun. She apologizes but asks if they can meet tomorrow. Later, Woo Yun apologizes again for the sudden request, saying she feels this is something that should be discussed in person. Kiryu assures her there's no need to apologize. Though he finds calls from the association almost always troublesome, he does owe this B rank a favor and decides to at least hear her out. She tells Kiryu she needs his analytical skills and asks if he could assist her with some work for about 2 weeks. He asks if she wants him to appraise some items. Woo Yun denies it, explaining that it's for a case where they're working with the police. The culprits left traces at a certain gate, but no one can interpret them, causing the investigation to stall. They even brought in a national appraiser, but it led nowhere. Since all the high-profile cases are monopolized by overseas firms or major guilds, the remaining field appraisers have only limited expertise.